going to call the meeting to order. Thank you very much, everybody. My first time sitting in this position. I'll try to do my very best, but be kind and be patient. Thank you very much. I'd like to do roll call right now. All members are here except Chair Dale. Personal matters, and we have Mayor Thompson away on municipal business. I'd like to know if there are any declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none. We'll next do the approval of the minutes. Could I have somebody move it and second it, please? Move it by Councillor Fonseca. Oh, sorry. See, already faux pas.
You should be wearing the necklace.
I'm too anxious to move forward.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I understand that in order to make an amendment to the motion that was passed at the last meeting with regard to the regional roads review, we need to deal with that. Maybe Catherine can clarify. We would have to reopen the question to make an amendment, and we'd deal with that during the minutes or at another point in the meeting.
The minutes is the item on the agenda that allows the motion to be brought not as a notice of motion, but rather as a motion on today's agenda. So what we would do is at approval of agenda. If there's a motion, we'll add it at approval of agenda and deal with it under other business.
Okay, can we do that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well done.
That the minutes of the October 27th, 2016 Regional Council meeting be approved. Could I have it moved by Councillor Spovieri and seconded by Gail Miles? Thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? No? Thank you. We now have the approval of the agenda. That the agenda for the November 10th, 2016 Regional Council meeting include a communication from the City of jurisdictional and financial responsibility for regional roads to be dealt with under items related to public work. Report relating to advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose and labor relations or employee negotiations to be dealt with under in-camera 15.4. And further, that the agenda for the November 10th, 2016 Regional Council be approved as amended. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Palashi, and a seconder, Councillor Matt Mahoney. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Miles?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Under other business, I'd like to add an item titled Regional Agendas.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Sato?
Thank you. My understanding is that the letter from the City of Brampton relates to the same motion that, excuse me, that I asked that we bring forward. The clerk said that we should deal with mine under other business, but you just said we would deal with the letter under public works. So can we just make sure that we're consolidating so that we deal with it under the same thing? Maybe both under public works?
We'll do both under public works.
Okay, thank you.
Next we have are our delegations. 5.1, Peter Dundas, Chief and Director of Paramedic Services, and Paul Sonoblin, Specialist, Community Safety Programs. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Morning.
Nice to see you.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of council. Exciting day. I know we had quite a bit of enjoyment last year going through this, but Paul and I are here to bring you up to speed as to where we're at with our public access defibrillation program, and also to spend some time with you reteaching some CPR. And you all have little friends at your tables, and we have a lot of hands-on. It's important that the bystander CPR and AED is a real important program out in the community. And for us to be able to promote that, we have systems in place with a lot of responder groups. But one that we're most proud of is our Peel MedVents group, which are a group of young men and women who are venturers and rovers under Scouts Canada, but it's a medical focus. A number of them who have gone through high school and that have ended up becoming paramedics as a result of the MedVents program. And today, we're quite thankful that parents allowed a lot of them out of school to be here to be able to help us with this event, because it's so important to be able to promote CPR and AED defibrillation. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Paul, who's going to bring you up to speed quickly on where we're at with our program, and then we're going to be doing some hands-on training with you.
Hello. It's been a year, so I just wanted to give you an update of some of the things that have happened since we started this. So this is the second time I'm being able to present. Year one, we were actually in the build mode. Now we're into execution mode. And so we're actually starting to see some gains and traction in what we're doing. So we've seen a 3% year-over-year increase in the amount of actual bystander CPR in our region. So we've gone from 30% to 33%, and we're going to continue to move that needle. That's the objective, getting more people involved in more ways. We've also seen the increase in AED usage as well. So that's, yeah. So for AEDs, when we did the last update last year, we were at 12 per year. So happy to report this year, we've actually increased that number to 20 activations. So we've seen this translate into more lives being saved, more information being put out there. But it's like a great opportunity. We're starting to see the results of what we're doing, and very quickly at that, getting that awareness piece out there. One of the other things that we're doing and looking at is kind of future initiatives, getting the community involved, creating responder programs, crowdsourcing applications. You were here when Sheldon did his report. So we're working towards that. How do we achieve those milestones that he said as the future of how we're doing it? And we're actively looking at that. So we've collected a lot of information, we put it together, and really making that headway towards this. There's links here for a video, and I know you can view it on your report, to talk about those applications that Sheldon was presenting in crowdsourcing, and that's something we're actively looking at with our community partners to get that engagement for the individuals when it comes to CPR and responding in the community. So a lot of exciting things, AED placement in the region. So with our rollout of our AEDs, I'm happy to say as of the time the report was done, we had just RPAM facilities, but now we have RPAM facilities, all the public works yards. We're now just we've done all the assessments, we're just waiting for physical into the wall for the cabinets, and all our CRCs will be done. Everything will be up and running, and our program will have full implementation. So it's exciting in that we'll have 100 AEDs in our regional buildings and be cardiac safe. So no employee in this region, when they're working inside a building, will be more than 90 seconds away from an AED, and that's that targeted time frame. So we've hit that milestone, like by Christmas, they'll be done. So it's active with Public Works right now and getting that accomplished. So we've made that headway. We've also accounted for all the AEDs in the community. We've talked to the school boards. We now know who has what, how can we help them, how can we support them. So the engagement is really good and we're collecting a lot of information. We're now up to about 700 AEDs known in our community, and that we still have more to go. My guess is we're at 1,000, if not more, and once we bring that all together, this will be awesome. I'm pretty excited.
As you can tell.
So I believe the next part is we're gonna go in, unless there's questions, we'll go into the demonstration portion. Demonstration?
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Perfect.
Floor is yours.
All right. Come on now, guys. So joining us are the med beds, and if I can get another volunteer.
He only wants another one because I couldn't get the package open last year, so. Look, it's all open.
Looking around to see the but last year we did this, it was a lot of fun and engaging. Get an AD. And that's without further ado, counselors, if I can ask you to stand up. So, first things first, if you come across someone and they're laying on the ground, we have to make sure
Work away at it.
they're not sleeping. So, less aggressive. First things first, if you find an individual who is on the ground, you're not sure, conscious breathing, not breathing, try and wake them up. So try and wake them up. And nothing's happening. So, you try and wake up, you're getting no reaction. So the next thing you probably should do is what? So call 911, send someone to call 911 and get an AED. Okay? Now we want to see, are they breathing or are they not? How do we check if someone's breathing? Oh, bonus points. We want to look, listen, feel. We want to look at the chest. Is it rising? Is it falling? Is it? No, there's no movement.
I better not on that one.
Equals not good. So, what we want to do is hands in the center of the chest. So put one hand right down the center of the chest. There you go, like that, perfect. The other hand over top. And then you're going to press. You want to push hard, push fast. 30 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 30. You get to clear. This is the upper movement. I do have a training mode for it. So we're going to put this in. You don't actually have to have training. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. Thank you. And the answer is no. As long as you can understand how to hit a power button, this will walk and guide you through everything you need to know. Have the skill to save a life. Have a certificate. What we do is we So, we now take the pause. We've done our 30 compressions. The AD has arrived. Councilor Van, you get to push the power button. There. It's upside down.
Yes, upside down.
So now this machine's going to walk us through what we need to do.
Okay, I don't that.
That's it.
Patient, analyze.
So right now it's looking at his heart. What is his heart?
Patient, analyze. Ultrasonic. Patient says flashing shock
So
button.
now push that middle button, the flashing one.
Shock delivered. Start CPR.
And so now hands in the center of the chest. And you start doing your compressions. Now the same part. There you go. Stay alive. You just don't want to do the first part of the song, like at first I was afraid. It's too slow. Yeah, so this machine, while we're laughing, it will yell at you. If you need to work harder, it's going to let you know. And then if you're doing a good job, it will actually say, good compressions. So it gives you that real-time feedback. So when you're like, oh, I'm so tired, it's going to be like, you need to work harder. Woo! And it gives you that reminder. You can stop. Because it's going to get you doing that for 2 minutes. But yes, and after 2 minutes, change it up. Using these. Different than pretty much any other program. There have been many in Brampton. We sat down and we here's where you save a life. And it's a neat opportunity. Great opportunity. I actually got to go to it's nice to be Thank you.
Paul, come sit down. We have questions. Maybe questions or just acknowledgements, one or the other.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for that. It looks simple, but I think under stress and in the situations we sometimes find ourselves in, it's not so easy. But thank you for making it look that way. I know my husband and my twin boys are both trained in it after me having serious heart issues. So I appreciate the technology has moved along quite beautifully. So thank you very much. We have a couple of counselors on the board. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, I see that our young people, our scouts, have left, but I was wondering if one of them was brave enough to just come forward and talk a little bit about their experience working on this.
Is Mark there?
Oh, here's one.
You don't know what you're walking into. Come on down. Here, come have a seat here.
So Mark, I'm right here. Mark? Mark?
If you look right over here, the red light on the.
Okay, are you Mark?
Councillor Myers.
Oh, no wonder he's not looking. Okay.
I think she wants a break from one of
So I just
Go ahead.
wanted to ask you, I think it's pretty phenomenal what you're doing and working on this, and I just wanted to ask you about your experience and how you feel about this, because it's got to be amazing saving someone's life, and you are actually helping training other people, so the impact it's pretty nice. So I just wanted to ask you how you feel.
It's actually really awesome to be able to work with a great group of med vents and med rovers and Peel paramedics. We do a lot of events, and they honestly make a huge difference in young people's lives, including my own. Through them, I've gotten more confident talking to other people, learning how to help people, and I've been with them for 4 years, and I plan on staying with them.
Good for you. Good for you. Would the other young man like to say something?
Oh, absolutely. Just working with Peel paramedics and the Peel med vents and med rovers as well, and working with other youth organizations like the Cubs and the Scouts and the Beavers, and teaching them the first aid and CPR skills, those basic first aid skills, and then seeing the result, like a 3% increase over the year, it makes me feel like I am making a difference to my community, and that is incredibly heartwarming.
Good. Well, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Yeah, I think I can speak for the rest of council. We really applaud you, and we look forward to our paths crossing with you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not when we're down. But thanks.
Thank you. We have Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this again.
Thank you.
It's a seventh inning stretch at the beginning of the council meeting. I just have a quick question about the technology, the AED.
Yes.
And the first thing that came to my mind was, especially in the region of Peel, very multicultural. A lot of people, English is not their first language. Does the equipment have the capacity at some point to where you can press for a different language? Because, the worst thing is if somebody, thinks they know how to use it, and the instruction is not coming across, partly because of the emotion in a different language.
So that question actually was asked yesterday when I was meeting with Zoll, one of the suppliers of those particular machines. English is the predominant language on every single unit in the world. You can program it to respond in another language, but you can't do a manual selection of different languages. So what they've done to mitigate and work around that is gone to using graphics to explain. So you'll see on the new devices, when we purchase our next round of AEDs in this region, it's actually got a large graphic interface that everything is like visual prompting. So
good.
that's how they're mitigating or working around the multilingual.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Sato?
Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank you for being here again this year. I think it's a great way to start council. I know last year when I asked you to come, and some of my colleagues were like, "We're going to do what?" But I think from the feedback after last year, we had very positive comments from members of council, and I think it's, I think I could safely say that it's a very important way of starting this particular week. I'm very impressed with the youth as well, being here and working on this. You know, Paul, you are everywhere with you and your staff with the AEDs and the body. Every event that I've held, you've been there offering CPR training and the defibrillator training, and it is one of the more popular tables or displays at any event. And families are there, and language doesn't seem to be an issue. I mean, you have, I know you've dealt with people that English is not their first language, and they have been able to learn how to use it, and quite well. So, I think the outreach that we're getting out into the Peel community is excellent. And working, as we talked earlier, the City of Mississauga has assembled a list of all of the defibrillators in the City of Mississauga, and we're going to be working, staff are going to be working very closely with Peel paramedics to give you that list, because I know there are some that you're not aware of, and it's a very large list, and that eventually we can get it into Pulse Point. One thing I did find out, I was doing a photo op with our communications staff a week ago, that when you open the cabinet, there's an alarm that goes off.
Yes.
Some of the cabinets, I thought was interesting, because at City Hall, some of the cabinets were locked and required a key. I think the one up by the fitness center required a key. And I was over at Central Library, and there was no key, and I thought, well, this would be a better shot if we open up the cabinet, and, I can be reaching in. And I opened up the cabinet, and this alarm goes off all over Central Library. So staff very quickly at the desk called over to security and said, oh, the counselor opened the door to the cabinet. And so I thought that was a good thing, though. I wasn't aware of it. But what it did was let staff know that someone had opened the cabinet, and the alarm apparently went off over at security at City Hall to alert them that a defibrillator might be used, so that they could respond without anyone even having to phone across. So I thought that was a very excellent, found out accidentally, but it was a good part of the program. But just keep up the good work. We are really improving the number of people trained in CPR and Peel, and people want to be trained. They want to know how they can respond. So great job.
Thank you. I'm going to blush.
Councillor Raz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll wrap it up with my favorite story, which is one of my dad. And he was saved by a kid or a high school student who is certified in CPR 2 weeks before he had his cardiac arrest, when he was visiting my sister in LA one year, which is almost 10 years ago. And that student went on to become a paramedic. So you can make a difference, and CPR is the first step to saving somebody's life. So get your friends and your families to the 30 compressions, 2 breaths is easy. And it's a lot less complicated than it used to be when we were growing up. So you can't stress it enough how easy it is to do and how important it is to know it. So thank you very much for coming today.
No problem.
I'd just like to thank you again for the hands-on presentation. It was fabulous, very interactive, got us all going. We didn't have to run around the room to wake up, it got us going. Thank you. Under items related to health, 6.1 is an update. And for information, I'm wondering if we can bring that up.
Will we deal with it?
Deal with it. Yes, thank you. So the mover, and I need a seconder. Mover, Councillor Raz, and second, we'll change that around. Councillor Sato moved it, and Councillor Raz seconded it. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And you'll receive the presentation also? Thank you. All in favor? Sorry, I'm reading my notes. Thank you. 5.2, we have a delegation from Sharon Douglas, Director, United Way, Peel Region, and Chair, Peel Alliance to End Homelessness, and Michelle Leek? I apologize. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Good morning, Madam Acting Chair, councillors, staff, and guests, and all of our colleagues on the Peel Alliance to End Homelessness. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and sort of close the loop on the work we started earlier this year around the 20,000 Homes Registry Week. I think you would have received the council report already, and the final report you would have received the executive summary. I also want to acknowledge and say thank you very much to the Region of Peel for financing providing us with the funding to complete the final report. And so today we're pleased to bring you the findings of that. We're going to flip through because we know we have a few just to refresh your memory. Oh, yeah. Very good. The 20,000 Homes campaign, which we started discussing and planning with, and my colleagues from the Alliance and our members are with me here today, so I want to really acknowledge them because they've been key to us achieving the amount of work we did in the past year. It's a national movement that is targeted and committed to housing 20,000 of Canada's most vulnerable homeless individuals by July 1st, 2018. The coalition is now called the Peel Alliance to End Homelessness, and that was an evolution of the initial group, which was called 20,000 Homes Peel Campaign. It was chaired by United Way, moi, and these are all of our partners, and so you can see that. We're going to flip again, Michelle. The Registry Week is the first step into 20,000 homes. It's a comprehensive process for us to be able to identify as many individuals experiencing homelessness as possible. In early June of this year, we had almost 200, or we ended up with about 150 volunteers who canvassed identified hotspots across the region and were able to implement a tool called the VI SPDAT. And what this tool does is help us to measure and determine the acuity of the individual's homelessness. We ended up at the end of that 3-day period surveying about 455 individuals. What was significant about that, because along with the homeless people who were actually homeless at the time, was that there were so many people who were precariously housed. And so while we spoke to them during that 3-day period, some were saying, you know what, by Friday, I'm in an apartment now, but by Friday I won't have a place to sleep. And so it was really significant as we look at program planning and service delivery and wraparound of services. The final report focuses only on the 262 who were actually homeless at that point in time. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Michelle to take you through some of the data.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. So I'm going to be going through some of the statistical findings from the information that we gathered from individuals who are homeless. So focusing on some of the demographics, out of the individuals we surveyed, 58% were male and 41% were female. The age demographics, so 12% were between the ages of 16 and 20. A large bulk of the individuals whom we surveyed were between 20 and 40 years old. 16% were between 41 and 50, and 18% were over 60 years old. Some of the other demographic findings were that 27.5% reported to having been struggled with mental health issues, learning disabilities, or a head injury that actually impacts their living situation. 43% identified as racialized or visible minorities. 12% identified as Aboriginal or having an Aboriginal ancestry. 12% came to Canada as immigrants or refugees in the last 5 years, and 30% moved to Peel Region within the past year. About living, 52.7% of the individuals we surveyed utilize emergency shelters at night. 20.2% do what's called couch surfing, so stay on friends or family's couches. 15.7% said that they actually sleep outdoors every night. 3.4% said they're staying with family and friends, and 2.7% said other. 1.9% said they were sleeping in their car. 1.5% said they were staying in a hospital or some other healthcare facility. 1.5% stay in hotels or motels, and 0.4% have stayed in jails or detention centers during the night. 38% of the individuals we surveyed identify as chronically homeless. And chronically homeless means they're homeless for 6 months or more within the last year. And 26% of the individuals we surveyed identified as episodically homeless. And episodically homeless means that 3 or more episodes of homeless occur within the past year. Another thing that we measure on the survey is the acuity, and an acuity level speaks to the severity of the various issues. In the case of the evidence-informed common assessment tool, like the VI SPDAT that we used, acuity is expressed as a number, with a higher number representing more complex, occurring issues that are likely to impact the overall housing stability of the individual. So low acuity means individuals would be more inclined to have they're transitionally homeless. So interventions focus on rehousing, prevention, access to mainstream supports. Moderate acuity is episodically homeless individuals, where interventions focus on treatment, housing stability, reducing frequency of homelessness spells. And those with high acuity are chronic homeless. Their interventions that we would focus on is permanent housing stability and intensive supports for those individuals. So for the total samples that we received, the breakdown goes as follows. For mainstream housing, so that's a low acuity score, 0 to 3, 25% of the individuals we surveyed had a low acuity. For rapid rehousing, about 45%, and for permanent support housing, about 30%. If we break it down to the chronically and episodically homeless, the mainstream housing, for those who are chronically homeless, we would assume that 16% would gain from that. For rapid rehousing, 44%, and permanent support housing, 40%. For the individuals who experience episodic homelessness, 11% would be fit for mainstream housing, and 28% for rapid rehousing, and 61% for permanent supportive housing.
So that's a high-level report on our findings. The next steps for the Peel Alliance to End Homelessness. We had applied to the Provincial Poverty Fund for some money to continue some of the work. We were disappointed we were not successful. So we've rewritten our work plan to really focus on what was called the by name list. So when we conducted the VI SPDAT, we were able to ask people to share their names, names of birth, where could we find them again, and how could we go back to them. And so we've developed a subcommittee of service providers who will now take this by name list and work with the people that we've identified with the highest acuity, those who are most chronically homeless, and hopefully develop some wraparound services to support those people and get them into some permanent housing. A number of our partners who are our members at the table right now are also service deliveries, like Our Place Peel, SHIP, St. Leonard's Place. And so as we go through that list and clean it up, we're hoping to reach out to more members within the community. The next piece that we want to do is to be able to advocate for the adoption of the VI SPDAT as a tool, as a common assessment tool for all Peel service providers across the region. And the intention is to continue to enumerate the homeless population within the region. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It really touches my heart. You think that we're making headway, and we probably are, but we could do so much more. But thank you for the awareness. We do have some people on the board. First on the board was Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Thank you for your presentation, excellent presentation. Councillor Innes and Mayor Thompson and myself, I think it was this February, we slept in our cars for the United Way to promote ending homelessness. And it was very interesting. It wasn't a cold night. It was actually pretty warm.
It was, yeah.
So, we sort of got off easy. But it opened your eyes up to a lot of things. It's very uncomfortable sleeping in the car. One of the things we were fortunate is in the morning when we got up, we can go into the washroom, we can use the washroom, we can go home, we can take a nice bath, we can go to our own beds. And so, I thought about it and I thought, these homeless people don't have that luxury. They can't go home and take a nice hot bath or go into a nice warm bed. So it opened your eyes to a lot of things. It also, like I said, we were very lucky because it wasn't that cold, but what happens when it's freezing cold? How do they stay warm? Some of the other things is you park your car somewhere, how do you know you're safe? Or you're out on the street somewhere, how do you know you're safe? We were in a parking lot in the municipal parking lot with the OPP checking in ever so often. These people don't have that. So it just makes us realize how fortunate we are and really the need and the reason that you advocate for these homeless people. So just a couple of questions. What do you see as sort of the main reason or cause for these people ending up on the street?
Thank you for your comments around Longest Night, and we will be doing that again this year. When we asked people, why did you end up here? What precipitated this? Some of the main reasons we heard was breakdown in families, mental health, addictions, substance abuse. They lost a job, so they were unemployed, and things just spiraled out of control, and then the family broke down. Abuse within, for some of the women who were fleeing from abusive situations. For some of the women didn't want to be in shelters, or they were more in shelters than some of the males, but primarily family breakdown, mental health, abuse, addictions, unemployment, the whole gambit.
Yeah, some sort of crisis.
Some crisis in their life precipitated this, and then it just escalated, and they were not able to sort of catch themselves again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on something that you were talking about earlier. Individuals who are experiencing homeless, their day functions around survival, right?
Yes.
So we have a good idea of where they go to get a meal each day, where they go to service providers, where they're likely to sleep at night. So when we did the survey, we really focused on, these key areas so we could capture as many individuals as possible. And a lot of the frontline staff that are here today that work at our various service providers are very aware of their ongoing daily situation, so that helps out a lot.
The demographics that you're serving or that you're working with, do you find, what is the breakdown in there in terms of age? Are you finding a lot of young people homeless? Are you finding, just a breakdown of that?
Yeah, we had a slide on that.
We had the slide on that.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
Majority
were middle-aged, between 20 and 40 years old. But when you're talking about those who, are most in need, those that have, who are chronically homeless, they fell usually in the higher age bracket, so between 40 and 60 years old, and those are the ones that we feel are most vulnerable and that we really need to address.
Can I add to that for youth, we use the term couch surfing, and for many of the youth, they didn't understand the term. They felt that, well, I'm at my cousin's place, or I'm at a good friend's place, so we're not homeless. But there were many of our youth that are under the terms homeless, and by far the greater number were males. And so that continues to be the case.
Well, thank you for your work and the advocacy that you're doing, and certainly I'm sure that all of us sitting around this table will be more than happy to do whatever we can to end homelessness. Again, we don't realize really how fortunate we are. But when you're out there and doing what you do, you see it firsthand. There was a time in my life I worked as an executive director for a women's shelter, and I can tell you, it is very, very sad when you see the situations that some of these individuals are in, no fault of their own. But again, it's great that these shelters and people like yourselves are out there to help these individuals to get them in a home or back into the community. So thank you, and whatever certainly I can do. And I'm sure we have a committee here, that maybe a governance committee or something, that we can maybe take it through there and help you advocate for more funding, the funding that you're not getting, and get the funding for these individuals to get them off the street. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Well, this certainly, creating the by name list and doing this survey is just the first step, right? So this by name list, we hope that it will be a fluid list, a list that all service providers can utilize. The VI SPDAT tool, the assessment tool, be utilized by all service providers throughout the region. And so we have a coordinated system approach to care moving forward. That's our goal, really.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I'm wondering if we could bring forward item 7.1 in the Human Services agenda, because it speaks to the data that you have before you in this report.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the presentation. I guess the first thing in dealing with this issue is really understanding the issue, and this kind of information is certainly going to help us as we move forward with this. This is a priority of our council, so it's really great. And just so members of council, just as a reminder, maybe a month ago, we did have a series of reports in Human Services about housing and homelessness, and we did dedicate funding for to continue to try and increase the supply of affordable housing. And there was a good portion of that I think about 28 or 30 million that was going to go to supportive housing as well. Yeah, so in the budget that we're going to be dealing with next year, there are funds to address some of these issues. But I guess what I'm worried about when I look at the executive summary, if you look at 7.1.5 for members of council, I know it helped me better understand the statistics that the ladies presented, because it is an executive summary. But I was wondering, it says, based on the data, 45% of the respondents should be supported through rapid rehousing programs, and 30% should be provided with permanent supportive housing. And I don't think we have any supply. So how do we do that? Like, that's the big question. Right now, there's a waiting list. Anybody who's needing housing has to go on this wait list. So, and I don't think we've passed any resolutions to say that we're going to do rapid rehousing for people on the wait list that are chronically homeless, unless I've missed something. So I guess I'm going to ask my question through to the commissioner in regards to, am I missing something, or is this just really showing us the great need in the community?
Through the chair, definitely this does show us that the need is in the community and we have an issue with supply. We have not made homelessness a local priority, so it doesn't impact in terms of expediting people from the wait list. Rather, we provide funding to some of our agencies, such as Salvation Army, and they work with homeless individuals to try and find them housing. but I don't want to leave the impression that it is easy.
Okay, well, I guess then, you know, I'm happy to receive the report for information. And I think that, you know, members of council, we have to keep this top of mind as we move forward and as we're going into a budget process. We do have RFPs out to provide more affordable housing, but I don't know if that's really going to make a dent in this particular need. And again, maybe we need to be doing some thinking outside of the box to see how we can be addressing this need in a different way. And I think certainly SHIP is probably one of our biggest partners in providing supportive housing, and that building is going to be opening up, the one in Brampton on Hanson Road. Hopefully that's going to assist in some way the need for supportive housing. But it's such a big issue, and we haven't been able to, we haven't done enough. We're making inroads, but we're not nearly doing enough, so thank you. And I will move the report and receive the delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. I think we have the CAO who would like to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. You're absolutely right. One of the biggest problems we have is lack of stock. I believe the latest numbers I saw was a vacancy rate in rental accommodation in Peel of about 1.6%. Is that correct? Which means for every 100 rental units available in Peel at any one point in time, there is one that's vacant. So that's and that's really churn. That's just turnover. So there is, as Councillor Miles has said, money we're proposing in the budget to assist in developing more housing. We do have, we're working with 21 different providers right now through an RFP process to try and develop more housing. So there is work underway, but it is not a quick solution. There are other approaches in the previous meeting to this one. Commissioner Sheehy talked about the funding, $1 million that just came out for violence, victims of violence, for rapid housing that we've received. That will allow us to place about 100 victims of violence off our waiting list with subsidy if they can find a place. So there are a number of things ongoing. There is the youth shelter in Brampton that we're working on. The challenge we have is that the need is immediate, but the solutions take time.
Absolutely.
And for the work that you do.
Just one other thing I forgot to mention, there'll be a report on the next council. We're doing a number of things with technology to connect people who are homeless. We have an application out right now that you'll see next week or next meeting, where people who are homeless on the street can use a mobile app on their phone if they have one to find a bed in our shelters. And the people who work with the homeless will be rolling that out to them as well. That same app is used by the people running the homeless shelters as their intake mechanism, so it makes the whole thing much smoother. So we are looking at sort of some out of the box innovative approaches.
So while I still have the floor, can I ask a question? And I don't know, how many actual outreach workers do we have on the streets dealing with the homeless issue, if any?
Through the chair, we do have outreach workers, I believe 24/7, but I would have to get back to you to the actual number.
Because I know I do encounter homeless people and people sleeping on the streets in downtown Brampton, and I'd like to be able to go to them and say, you don't have to be homeless, or give them a card, or do something, do some kind of intervention, not just look and walk on by. So
we do have, if I may, Madam Chair, we do have a homeless outreach team that's actually a multidisciplinary team working with mental health and other...
CMHA has a team.
Yeah.
I think it's about half a dozen people.
And they're available 24/7.
They have a van.
So in a case...
But one van for the whole region.
Yeah, so in a case where we do see a homeless person sleeping on the street, do we call them?
I'll get the information.
They usually, police force is usually the first point of contact actually for most of those individuals. People call the police, but you know,
You could reach out to
you
that.
could reach out
Yeah,
to the
you could.
CMHA team in
yeah.
Peel.
Yeah, the street outreach team.
What about 311 or 211?
What we can do is provide you with a number of the street helpline and the crisis team so that you can call them and they will reach out and find the people.
Can we call 311 or 211?
You can, and they'll connect you through.
They would be able to connect us to the appropriate person.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Tovey?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the work that you do. It's badly needed, and unfortunately, I believe you're in a growth industry, so it's very disheartening for all of us. I just wanted to sort of get down to some of the numbers. So you had 455 roughly respondents, of which 262 were usable. 15.7% of that usable were people that were actually sleeping out on the street, so that's about 38 people. Do you have any idea region-wide how many people that might extrapolate to on a nightly basis of sleeping on the streets in the region? I know that's a difficult question.
It is, because the survey that we conducted was over 3 days and 3 nights, right? So really, we tried to capture as many individuals as possible who would fall into our categories by, you know, either taking the streets or going to the service providers during specific times. So we did the best we could, and we hope to.
No, we don't have an actual number that we could sort of translate. I'd be hesitant and sort of cautious to put out a number there. Part of the challenge in administering the survey was that some people didn't want to participate, and we really relied heavily on the street outreach team for when people congregated in the evenings, and so we didn't want to put our volunteers in any sort of, you know, difficult situation. And so as we were able to capture names and numbers at the end of that 3-day period, I'd be hesitant to give a number. I wouldn't say it's a completely comprehensive, conclusive document, because we did have some people that did not chose not to participate.
When I was at the FCM conference in Vancouver, we did a full day of touring a lot of their social infrastructure, and of course, because it was the city of Vancouver and because we were all visiting councillors, they made it look pretty darn good. And actually, you know, they showed us the Needle Exchange place in Gastown and how nice and neat and clean this all was, and after dinner, I was thinking to myself, that was a little too slick. So I went out at 1 o'clock in the morning with a pocket full of loonies and 2 packages of cigarettes, actually. And I stayed out in the street till about 5 o'clock in the morning interviewing homeless people. And they were all very, very glad to see me because I had A, cigarettes, and B, loonies. So that worked out quite well. And the thing that really shocked me about the homeless people is almost every single one of them that I spoke to and said to them, "Why are you out on the street?" Almost every single one of them told me the reason they were out on the street that particular night because they didn't feel safe in the shelters. They didn't feel protected. I didn't see that anywhere in your data as far as homeless. Did you actually ask the people that question, or was it more generic? I didn't ask them that specific question. I just said, why do you prefer sleeping on the street? There's a shelter right around the corner. And they all said, well, you know, I had my wallet in the bottom of my sleeping bag. Somebody cut a hole in it, and my wallet was gone. They got beaten up. Oh, just horrible. People were doing drugs in the homeless center, all that kind of stuff. So what sort of feedback did you get in that regard?
We did hear many stories from quite a few that they were not feeling safe in the shelters. In particular for some women who were not feeling safe in the shelters because they felt that they were more vulnerable in the shelter system. Some preferred, so if you had an addiction problem and you were either high that evening or drunk that evening, then the rules of the shelter, you couldn't purchase, you couldn't be in the shelter. More people experience, although they were experiencing some degree of physical violence or they were, you know, roughed up on the streets, they still felt safer and better on the streets. So we did hear a number of stories along that. We don't have numbers around that. We didn't disaggregate it to that level. But yes, it wasn't an uncommon statement. We were interested in hearing that, surprising to hear that, especially for senior women, that in our central library, actually, in Mississauga, there were some sort of sleeping in the alcove
Yep.
there or in Celebration Square, and they felt safer there than going in. So, yes, it wasn't.
Yeah, because
So I think the service provision, and as we look at what wraparound looks like, it's a matter of like bringing those two pieces of work together and addressing what are some of the challenges we face in the shelter system and in administering the programs and services and meeting the needs of those individuals as they enter into the system.
Yeah, and I think that kind of data would be very, very helpful for us as to help inform us how we can better monitor our own shelters and make those people feel safer when they are in the shelters. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And certainly, the conversation about having different forms of housing, specifically around housing that is transitional as well as supportive. Supportive housing is the big need we're finding.
Councillor Anika?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Well, I have the privilege from time to time, Michelle comes in to see me and we talk about this issue, and she and I try to keep an eye on Highway 5 and 10. And the last conversation we have, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my usual exasperation and another dumb Nando analogy, but I'll give you another one again. So here we are on this side of the lake, and all the hungry people are on the other side of the lake, and we're the municipal regional folks with our rowboat and a styrofoam cup. And there's the provincial government with the cargo freighter, and there's the federal government with the cargo freighter. And we're looking at these things, and we've got our cup and say, okay, let's do our share. So let's grab the food and put it in the boat and row across. And you notice nobody's following. And then you get to the other side, and you give them this little bit of food, and you sort of row back, and you go, the goddamn cargo ships still haven't moved. That's the problem, as Michelle and I agreed. If the ones with the deep pockets don't give a damn, and have announced a national housing strategy since the decade I was born. Like the National Transportation Strategy that's coming too, because it was announced the year I was born. I'm sure we'll get to it eventually.
Yeah.
And we're the kids in the dike that got nothing left to stick in the dike. Number two, in dealing with the problem, one of the greatest lessons I learned from you, it's so true, almost invariably, there's correlationships to people's problems. Is it mental health? Is it abuse, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm going to give you another Nando analogy. This is how appalling it's become. We put in a road management system in the city of Mississauga years ago where with infrared and radar we determined it may be time to do your road now. Some of the residents complained, I'm going back 20 years, saying, but my road looks pretty good, why are you doing that? We're sophisticated enough to know that if I put a few bucks in now, I'll save 6 or 7 times when the next frost or freezing will completely destroy your road and you need a complete rebuild. Isn't it amazing that it's the same ratio? For every dollar you put in on human health and care and well-being, you save 6 or 7 bucks. So I'm willing to do it for a road, but I won't take care of you today. But if tomorrow, through very little fault of your own, you end up in a penitentiary, for example, I got lots of money to build jails. At 6 or 7 times, and I'll incarcerate you at $100,000 a year to look after you. So with apologies, I thank you for your fight. I thank the individuals like Carolyn Parrish and others that we, in the rowboat, say, oh, look, we got a scrap piece of land somewhere. Will we give it away? We give it away for Habitat for Humanity. Relative to my balance sheet, I've done more in that one experience than the provincial federal governments have done in my entire lifetime. And you know, we feel good about ourselves, and in one project Carolyn's helped us with so much, we get 16 families off the streets. Great. What do you want me to do with the other 17,000? What do you want me to do with the $490 million I collect from all taxpayers in Mississauga on the residential portion every year? I could give you all of it, close down the city, right, because I can't run it anymore, and we still can't fix the problem. Finally, and this is, then the provincial come up with great ideas, you know, we'll let you deal with inclusionary zoning. What the hell is that? Have you got some money? And don't talk to me about affordable, talk to me about subsidy, and give me some goddamn subsidy with which to help people. So that's the problem. You know it, we know it. You come here and we listen to you and we try our best. I don't know if they don't listen in the legislature or in the House. I don't know what goes on. But it's 28 years and it really isn't changing. It's getting worse. So appreciate hearing from you. Certainly hope the MPs and the MPPs are hearing from you. And we need more than a little bit of a dent. We need the people with the cargo ships to start loading them once, a little bit more. with thanks for all of your efforts. Thank you.
Wow, I feel your frustration, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you. We have Mayor Jeffries would like to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. And I'm not going to have a rant, but I think that we're at a very difficult position right now, and your numbers, I think, are just the tip of the iceberg. The results are very sobering, and I think all of us, many people in this room, can be one crisis away from being homeless. It's really, really close, and I identified with Councillor Grove's comments about sleeping out in your car, which I and Councillor Medeiros did last night. I think after we were finished, we didn't want to do that again, but I'm pretty sure we will, because it really brings it back to what's important and how challenging it is for people who have every day that reality. So there's nothing that brings it home better than waking up early in the morning and realizing some people have to go to work or take their children to school or find a way to make a living in that terrible situation. You talked about the funding that you applied for, and you went through it really quickly that you said you were unsuccessful. Can you speak a little more about the funding that you applied for?
So, the provincial government, under the provincial poverty strategy, had a funding pot available, and we had applied to that with about 5 key deliverables. One was to continue the work that we did, started with the registry week. And so a key piece of that work was the by name list that would be created. So those who were most chronically homeless, to be able to have some funds to begin that wraparound service delivery, to look at what that looked like. Another key piece of that work was to be able to advocate for the VI SPDAT by all service providers across the region, also to be able to continue to enumerate that. We are not sure, but I think we have a meeting coming up very shortly, I think next week sometime, towards the end of the month, with the Ontario Trillium Foundation to sort of debrief, what more could we have added to that application and what was the rationale for us not being able to get funding. And so what it has forced us to do is really, out of those 5 or 6 deliverables, is really prioritize what we have the capacity to be able to do as an alliance, as the members around the table, and then potentially look at expanding that membership as we understand and grapple with what are the exact needs of those who have the highest acuity levels on it. So it's looking at some of our current partners, whether, again, it's the Salvation Army, Supportive Housing in Peel, Our Place Peel, to be able to say what kinds of services and programs do you have right now that may be able to address the immediate needs of the people that we've identified right now. And so hopefully out of that conversation at the end of the month, we'll get some more idea. The Canadian Alliance to End Housing and Homelessness also had applied for funding, and so I'm not sure if they received any, but in their proposal, there may be an opportunity for us to apply to them for some funding to be able to do maybe one of the deliverables. Yeah. And so we will continue to explore opportunities, and I think with the partners we have around the table who are really committed, action, results-oriented group, we may be able, in-kind services, to support one another.
Yeah, I really think that some of the work that we can do immediately does not involve a huge investment from the provincial and federal government. It's just about doing things differently. Many of our service providers, our waiting list for affordable housing, our shelters, their lists are first come, first serve lists. Mm-hmm. The main focus of having the 20,000 Homes campaign is to create a list of individuals based on need, not on first come, first serve, and addressing the individuals who are most vulnerable first. And if we all decide, service providers, shelters, the list for affordable housing, that's how we are going to provide service in this region, we can do that. And by assessing individuals, just like a triage approach in a hospital, utilizing one specific tool, and that being the VI SPDAT as an assessment tool as soon as an individual comes in. These things that we could do are affordable, they're accessible, they don't cost anything. We just have to start doing things smarter and differently and address the individuals who are in most need first.
So I just wanted to offer my support in your application on a future opportunity. So as a former MPP, a lot of people apply for grants, but many times I had no idea they were applying. And sometimes they're not really, and I'm not saying this about your application, but some of them just, they don't have the data to support a strong application. I think we can help you if we know you're applying. I think we can be better advocates. And I think our local MPPs want to be better advocates. We had MPP Bob Delaney here this morning, and he wanted to know what our issues were. This is one of them. They can be very helpful, and they're talking about their budget the day after the budget is completed. And Trillium grants come up more than once a year, so there are other opportunities that we can be helpful. So I would say that I'm happy to go with you to have this advocacy conversation. I'm happy to write letters of support for those advocacy positions, and I think that please call on us for those pieces of information. And I would also say I'm not as unhopeful about where we're going in the future. We have made progress in Peel Region. I know certainly in Brampton we have. From a provincial perspective, we have turned around funding formulas because of strong advocacy. We can do better, and certainly having so many, in Brampton we have 5 federal members who come to everything, want to know what the issues are, and are strong advocates for us. And we've had one-on-one meetings with ministers of infrastructure, the Prime Minister. I've never seen that kind of advocacy, and as a former Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, I couldn't get a meeting with anybody in Ottawa before. It's changing. We have to be better at helping you take this data and translate it into activities that will save lives.
Yes,
I don't want to study it forever. I want to get something actionable. So thank you for the work that you do. I know it's tough bringing this kind of information all the time and trying to move it forward. I want to help you, and I thank you both for doing what you do. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much for your offer.
We have Councillor Spovieri on the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, ladies, for your presentation. It certainly is depressing when we hear this type of information. I just have a few questions. Obviously, this has been a long-term problem, homelessness. It's not something new, although it's probably getting worse. It's increasing as the population grows, and also as there's more family breakdown in the system. Now, the question I have for you is, how long have you been tracking, what happens to these people? Let's say people who were homeless 5 years ago, that same as people who are today. Are they still homeless? Or have they found ways to bring their lives back to some kind of, back to on the road again type? Or are they just, it just keeps mounting the problem, compounding? And there are just more and more people out there homeless, and is that what you're finding, or do people eventually, they either, the younger kids move in with relatives or friends, or the older people perhaps they could, they find other ways to survive? What are you finding?
Well, I mean, those who are in chronic situations, who are consistently on the street, they usually stay within that sort of cycle of system. They get some money at the beginning of the month. Maybe they're staying in a hotel because that's what they can afford, utilizing the shelters and the soup kitchens, and in and out of hospitals, incarceration. It's a long-term cycle. Of course, those who are more of low acuity, actually, those who are episodically homeless, or individuals who experience a specific crisis, like domestic violence or other forms of abuse, have a greater opportunity to become contributing members to society and success stories. Like I'm one of them, for example. We've had those conversations with the individuals. When you meet a person, they like to tell their story, but we can't say, because we just started this by Nameless this year, and we hope to do something similar next year, another campaign next year where we're again enumerating individuals on the streets. Hopefully in 5 years I'll get back to you and be able to tell you if we have a group.
Can I add something to that? I think through our colleagues at the Region of Peel and under the Housing and Homelessness Strategy, so those for the previous 5 years, as we see our waiting list going down, I think you could probably track some numbers there. The 20,000 Homes Registry Week was just sort of one component of a larger strategy. And so we'll be able, as Michelle says, to be able to track those 262 from 2016 onwards. But I think it's a layered response, and that our colleagues at the region who head up the Housing and Homelessness Strategy would probably have some information that they could add to that. That we're not in a position to speak to.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mayor Crombie?
Thank you. Thank you both for coming forward. I just wanted to lend my voice as well. And I did the sleepover to raise awareness as well. It seems that when individuals in Peel Region become unemployed and lose their homes, they do sleep in their cars before they go into the shelter system. And we do have people who sleep in their cars, so it was a good initiative to raise awareness of that. But the whole issue of housing and the dignity and security of having housing for our residents is very top of mind for all of us. Here at Peel, Mississauga in particular, we have had a panel ongoing discussing the issue of affordable housing, but more so we were looking at rent geared to income or subsidized units and how we move that needle, less so on the shelter, although I think we all recognize the desperate need for shelters, and certainly Mississauga and in Brampton as well. We've been trying to deal with the whole issue of a youth shelter that's badly needed. I wanted to congratulate you. I also wanted to ask you what you think the universe of homeless people are in Peel. I know your sample size is 262, but I think at one point they thought it was somewhere between 5,000 and 11,000 people that are actually homeless in Peel. I wonder if you might speak to that.
Oh, yes. It would probably be a good guesstimate for us at this point in time. We know that as people move in and out of housing, and as they cycle in and out of shelters. Yep. Sometimes if we want to be able to just count unique individuals as opposed to counting somebody that might cycle through Knight's Table, go down to SHIP, pass through Salvation Army,
we don't really
maybe
know.
That same. So we at this point do not have.
And it doesn't capture people who are couch surfing and staying with their friends.
It doesn't.
So it's a tough number to put a handle on.
It's a tough number for us.
But it is a bigger problem than we realize, and in an area that is so, affluent as Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon. It's shameful. We really thank you for helping us address it and let us know how we can be more helpful. And certainly we're going to move the needle on the affordable front and on the subsidized front here at Peel. So we're going to do our bit and look at shelters as well. So thank you.
I don't think we'll ever not have homelessness.
I agree.
I think we will always have some degree of homelessness.
Yes, unfortunately.
It is unfortunate.
Because it's a very complex problem. Look at the issues involved, mental health, substance abuse, loss of job, loss of family, all of those issues. It's very, very complex. George and I were having a discussion. He was pointing to an individual that he's aware of living in their car who does so by choice because they do have a home in Northern Ontario. And so, there's a mental health issue, and so it's just very complex.
It's also being able to provide those wraparound services, especially those who are most vulnerable as well, in addition to the housing. I just wanted to let you know that Hamilton, 2.5 years ago, embarked on this 20,000 homes campaign, and it was spearheaded actually by the city of Hamilton. So here we are 2.5 years later, and they've reduced their homelessness rate by 35%.
Oh, that's
So
terrific.
if there
Wow,
is
more than a
commitment
third.
there, there is dollars there. If you decide to do things differently, it's a possibility.
I know it's on our radar now as we move forward on our affordable housing agenda, so we'll certainly have it up for discussion. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Human Services would like to make a few comments.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may. Just a few comments on a number of issues that have been raised. With respect to tracking the long-term outcomes of homeless individuals, we do have some data available, but I wanted to echo what David had mentioned, that we have a new information technology solution which has been developed in Peel, and that is going to help us quite a bit in terms of being able to track what happens to homeless individuals. In regards to the question as to the population of homelessness in Peel, it's long been recognized that it's very difficult to do a census on homelessness in an area, in a geographic area, and this is a problem across all of Canada, trying to determine what your homeless population is. So we struggle, as do other municipalities. And finally, I wanted to mention that we have invited representation from the City of Hamilton to our National Housing Day, which you've been invited to on November the 22nd, to talk about the successes that they have had in reducing homelessness. Thank you.
Councillor Fonseca?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Thank you both for being here. I'll echo a lot of the questions that I had were addressed by, or comments by other councillors or mayors that were on the board. But I just wanted to say thank you. I did have the opportunity to attend one of your forums at Burnham Thorpe Community Centre on the 20,000 Homes campaign, and I did want to say I think. One of the things that Councillor Tovey raised a question, but I wanted to say thank you for not only the courage but the persistence in going out and talking to those that are homeless. The question of why are you in this? Why are you choosing to be out on the street? In some cases, some of them are choosing to be because they feel safe, which is very alarming, but also. Obviously, there is a trust that they have anyone, depending on who it is, and obviously there's a different age demographic, but they've found a trust in being able to communicate with you, and I think that is extremely important in order to gather the data that's required. And the fact that I think just in terms of prioritizing matching what are the housing needs that they require with the support services is so essential. I think it's extremely essential. I think one of the things I wanted to point out that youth don't feel that they are homeless, but they are floating from a couch to couch to couch, or a neighbor or a friend, and I think that is a challenge in gathering the data properly. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I was wondering, through you, Madam Acting Chair, and I guess also to staff, if we could bring forward 9.3. This is I'm not sure if it's the appropriate time, but the 2016 triennial financial performance. There is item in the report under item 4, unanticipated federal homelessness partner strategy funding, that we have to, I believe, approve today. Is that not correct? It's going to be brought forward at another time in the agenda, but because these two young ladies are here today, would it be possible to bring it forward?
Thank you for the young. Yeah, thank you for the young.
Is that an appropriate time to bring it forward?
I've just got notice that if you'd like to bring that forward, we can do that.
Okay. I think it would be great just because you are here. So I don't know, Stephen, if you want to speak to that. I know there was going to be a bit of an update, but I know that there's a timing issue in terms of council approving. Is that okay to bring it forward now, or I'm just looking at staff? I don't know timing-wise.
Through the chair, there's no issues with bringing that forward. That would be fine.
Okay, I just think it's a good news story in terms of that federal funding and asking council to approve that portion of the report now, and it ties into this. So I don't know if anyone on staff wants to give a brief explanation around that, or if we just want to move it.
If I may, I'd like to ask Juliet Jackson to step down and give a little overview of the housing partnering strategy money.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one moment, please. That the 2016 operating budget be adjusted to reflect the new additional federal homeless partnering strategy, HPS, funding and related expenditures as outlined in the report of the Commissioner of Finance. And that Chief Financial Officer titled 2016 Triannual Financial Performance Report, August 31st, 2016. I guess we need a mover. And I need to have a mover and a seconder, please. Mover by Councillor Fonseca. And a seconder, Councillor Downey. And Juliet, you'd like to speak to that? Thank you.
So the funds, if I am correct, you're wanting to understand how we're using the funds from HPS? Okay, good. So we brought forward a report earlier this year where we wanted to direct the funding towards 25 rent supplements that would support people who were homeless. And so that pilot is going forward for a period of 3 years, and we'll be bringing you data back on that at a later date.
Good. Okay. I just thought it was an appropriate time to bring it because they are here and it does actually, in that report, speak to housing. So it's a positive. It's a positive. It's a good news thing. Even though it's not enough money, it still is a good news thing.
25 lives. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And we are working with Salvation Army around that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, all in favor? Could you? Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, if we can receive the delegation of 5.2, and if we can bring forward 7.1 at the same time. And Councillor Miles wanted to move it. Councillor Groves, would you second that? Wonderful. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you for your patience, guys. We now have items related to health, so I will turn this over to Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. Members of committee, item 6.1 was dealt with under delegation 5.1 this morning. The next is 6.2, and we have a presentation by Don Langtree. Yep. And just as a reminder, in your package this morning was handed out was a larger copy of the chart that was in the report. It's a little bit easier to read. If you can hold on for a moment, Don, Councillor Sato has a question.
No, actually, I'd like to introduce the presentation if I could, as this was came from the Health System Integration Committee. At our last committee meeting, we devoted the entire meeting to mental health, and we had presentations. We had about 5 presentations from various agencies that provide mental health services within the region of Peel, to the region of Peel and beyond. The information that we received was very concerning, and as you have seen with the chart that is in your agenda today, we took one look at this chart and kind of went, wow. You know, no wonder people are, going back to the previous presentation, no wonder we have so many people who are not able to get assistance with mental health issues. The information that we received at that committee meeting, we are going to be doing some advocacy work, and we'll be asking Regional Council to endorse that, and having our Government Relations Committee deal with it as well. But the committee felt, and as chair of the committee, I've asked staff to prepare an executive summary on what services are available for mental health in the region of Peel, but also to do this presentation today, as I feel it's very important that all members of council get some of the information that our committee was privy to a few weeks ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sato. Dawn, you're on deck.
All right. Through the chair, I'm Dawn Lanetree, and it's a pleasure to provide you with a summary of the health system integration meeting focused on mental health. My presentation complements the minutes and a report that was received by the committee where a lot more detail was provided. My aim today is to provide you with key findings about our mental health system, the region's roles within it, and our next steps. Mental health and addictions are very complex and often misunderstood. When we speak about mental health and mental illness, I think it's important to understand the difference. Mental health refers to one's emotional well-being and is a strong predictor of overall health. Supportive relationships, positive coping skills, strong self-esteem, and safe living environments are indicators and contributors of good mental health. Mental illness occurs when the brain isn't working the way it should. When this happens, one's mood, thinking, and behavior changes over time. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. Mental illness can be diagnosed, or it can often go undiagnosed, sometimes because of stigma or the nature of the illnesses themselves. This makes quantifying the impact of mental illness difficult. Despite this, experts suggest that 1 in 5 or 20% of the population are affected by memory spread across 15 different ministries. Some ministries play bigger roles. The Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and the Ministry of Children and Youth Services co-lead the province's mental health and addiction strategy called Open Minds, Healthy Minds. Sharon Lee Smith, Associate Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Long-Term Care, presented to the committee and highlighted that the province is currently focused on developing a new funding model and making it easier for youth to transition to adult services. Sharon Lee also spoke about the province's intention to invest in supportive housing. The Local Health Integration Networks, or the LHINs, fills a service system manager type role for adult mental health services, including leading our local system planning and funding for service providers. Representatives from both LHINs highlighted the challenges they face as both a funder and system coordinator. In particular, they raised concerns regarding the per capita funding allocated to both our LHINs is well below the provincial average. The Peel Children's Centre plays a similar role to the LHINs as lead agency responsible to plan and fund child and youth mental health services. It is also a direct service provider. Humphrey Mitchell, CEO, reflected similar themes regarding inequitable funding and long wait lists, especially for youth. He also questioned the merits of having two systems, one for adults and one for children and youth. The Canadian Mental Health Association, Peel Dufferin Branch, CMHA, is our largest adult mental health service provider. David Smith, CEO, provided us with an overview of their programs and services, including those in partnership with us and the police, like 24/7 crisis support, formerly called the Crisis Outreach and Support Team, or COAST. The connection between CMHA and the police is an important one because the number of mental health related calls is going up. Next, I'll take a few minutes to go over the roles the region plays. In trying to figure out how best to explain our roles, I think it helps to look at mental health services broadly across the continuum. On the far left are programs that support the development of healthy communities and ultimately promote positive mental health for the entire population. The regions plays a large role here. We help create healthy and age-friendly built environments through our official plan and public health programs. As well, employment, income, and housing supports help people build strong foundations, reducing the risk of mental illness. Also within this section, I'd like to highlight the importance of mental health supports within workplaces. In his presentation, David Smith noted that some 15,000 people in Peel will miss work today because of mental illness. This points to the importance of key supports of our own employees through our psychological health and safety program. The enhanced program will focus on prevention, interventions for at-risk employees, and supports through recovery and return to work accommodations. Further information on that program will be provided to Council in the coming months. The middle section includes programs that help identify and address risk factors early. These services are mostly provided by community-based agencies like the Peel Addiction Assessment and Referral Center and Punjabi Community Health Services, but the region does play some roles here. In collaboration with CMHA, our outreach team works with individuals and families to prevent homelessness through short-term supports and referrals. Other regional programs include the Needle Exchange, targeted at individuals experiencing addiction, and Families First, which helps sole support parents on Ontario Works who are at greater risk of experiencing or are experiencing mental health challenges. On the far right of the continuum are individualized services. The region's role here is small. Most of these services are provided by specialists like psychiatrists and other hospital-based supports, but our Special Behavior Support Unit at Sheridan Village Long-Term Care Home helps residents with dementia and responsive behaviors who cannot be cared for in regular long-term care settings. Finally, our system supports are key. For example, regional advocacy has provided other levels of government with a local perspective. We have advocated for greater integration between adult and child and youth system planning and service delivery, and for greater recognition of the broader mental health needs of seniors. Highlighting these challenges remains an important role for us, especially as the health sector evolves. The presentations at the Health System Integration Committee highlighted opportunities for change. As a result, the committee referred 2 advocacy priorities to the Government Relations Committee. The first is focused on addressing the historical underfunding issues faced in Peel. The second relates to the system integration issues, specifically to ensure more seamless access to services for all age groups, and for recognition that basic social needs like housing are contributors to mental well-being. This aligns well with our housing priorities. Working with our partners will ultimately help improve the system and the services within it. That concludes my presentation. My hope is that the outcomes of the Health System Integration Committee meeting are just the start of a conversation that will help make positive changes for people in Peel and beyond, particularly those of our friends, colleagues, and families struggling with mental health and addictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Members of Council, I'd like to ask you to recognize the work that Dawn puts into these organizational charts. She's put together, I don't know how her brain operates, but you've put together one on the health system that I know Matt Anderson used up at Brampton Civic, and you put one together for seniors programs as well. And they really, the picture's worth 1,000 words, and for me, this is the picture that really, speaks to so many of the other programs that we deliver and the complexity and helps us to advocate better. So I'd like to recognize you and thank you for putting these together. They make a world of difference. Councillor Parrish.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain to everybody, we had quite a few delegations at that committee, and we lost quorum at one point, and it was too bad because we couldn't make any motions or do anything at all. And I'm just kind of appealing to everybody around the table that if that day doesn't work or those meetings don't work and they want to step down and let somebody else join. We had quite an array of people. We had the Associate Deputy Minister from the province, and we had no quorum at a couple of points of the meeting. Some people filled in for others. I think Councillor Innes came down and filled in for somebody. And it's a bit embarrassing, and it's also a lot of work for 3 people to sit there and listen to. So I said I would mention it, and then Pat Sato said, "Are you going to mention it?" And I said, "No, I'm in enough trouble." And she said, "Do it anyway." So I just did it. But I did it with really good language.
Councillor Parrish, we can't wait for when you're not in trouble, so. Would you like to second
Yes,
the receipt of the presentation and the report? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks again, Dawn. We now have, we'll deal with the added item on the agenda. It's an update from Rob McIver and Paul Callanan. It is an update on the water pipe smoking ban in Peel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of Health Committee, our objective today is to apprise Council of a legal proceeding to quash a bylaw that you approved earlier this year, Regional Bylaw 30/2016, a bylaw to regulate water pipe smoking in the region of Peel. I'm Paul Callanan, Director of Environmental Health, and I will provide some of the background, and Rob McIver of Legal Services will comment on some of the legal aspects of the file. So Council will recall that in April of this year, you approved a bylaw to regulate water pipe use, otherwise known as hookah pipe use, in enclosed public places, enclosed workplaces, and in specified outdoor public places, close to playgrounds and sporting areas and spectator seating areas. So the approval was subject to the 3 local municipalities passing a consenting resolution under the Municipal Act, and that was done, and the bylaw came into effect actually last week on November 1st. Not unexpectedly, at the end of October, regional staff were served with a legal proceeding to quash the water pipe bylaw. As far as we're aware, there are currently 25 public water pipe businesses operating in the region of Peel, and the legal action was brought by 5 corporations representing 6 of those establishments, all of which are located in Mississauga. 4 are in Ward 5 and 1 each in Ward 3 and Ward 8. So although the regional water pipe bylaw is now in effect, while the legal challenge is underway, active enforcement against the operating water pipe establishments will not be undertaken, whether or not they are a party to the challenge. And But we are committed to continuing to communicate about the water pipe bylaw being in effect to both the public and to the businesses. And we will also continue to investigate complaints about tobacco use in water pipe establishments. Just by way of background on that, there were recent amendments to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act which permit seizure and sampling of shisha, the product used in water pipes. To date, we've taken 11 samples and actually 12 samples at 11 premises. One had 2 complaints against it. And 8 of the 11 samples came back positive for tobacco, which is contrary to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So I'll pass it over to Rob at this point.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just provide some additional detail. Paul mentioned that the notice of application was received on October 27th. The bylaw was scheduled to come into force, did come into force on November 1st, and Paul mentioned that enforcement was going to be deferred until we have some more clarity on this. And I can just add that together with the notice of application was served a notice of motion. And it was brought on an urgent basis, and so they were going to seek a temporary, an interim order that the bylaw not be enforced for the period of time before the application was heard. And so Paul's decision not to write tickets was based in part on that motion that would have been brought, and we were able to have it postponed. Council is probably already aware that in December last year, the City of Toronto enacted an amendment to their municipal code that prohibited hookah smoking in any business premises that required a business license. It was a similar application to the one that we now have, and the applicant parties were represented by the same lawyer who is representing those the applicants in Peel. Some of the particulars are different, but the relief sought and the grounds for the application are essentially the same. A decision was issued by the Ontario Superior Court of Justice on October 7th of this year to dismiss the application. So the Toronto bylaw is now affirmed and it's in force. However, there is some potential for an appeal of that decision, and we're waiting to see if that happens. If that does happen, it could have some impact on the scheduling, the timing of the application when it gets heard in Peel. Council might also know that there was a decision in 2015 that of the British Columbia Superior Court that affirmed the City of Vancouver's bylaw that dealt with the same subject matter. So in legal services, we're just currently assessing what need we might have for external legal resources, and depending on the outcome of that, we may be procuring those services through a competitive process. And the hearing itself is now scheduled tentatively for the week of March the 20th. And based on the Toronto application, we estimate it would take 2 days of court time to be heard. So those are our comments, subject to any questions you might have.
I have nobody on the board, so you must have done a good job. Someone like to move receipt to Mayor Crombie, Councillor Fonseca, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next committee, we have communications. There was an item that was originally included under Human Services that should have been under Health Services. It's 6.4. It's the letter from Minister of Transportation, Stephen Del Duca. Someone like to move receipt? Councillor Groves, Councillor Gibson, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Madam Acting Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. We have items related to human services. Could Councillor Miles look after that?
Yes, thank you very much. Members of council, we already dealt with the first item on the agenda, 7.1, the 20,000 homes registry. Moving on to 7.2 is a planning update for the development of the early years child and family centers in Peel. Here for your information. I'll take a motion to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All in favor? That's carried. The third item is the Green Investment Fund for Ontario program, and it is a requesting the authority to award funds. Comments, questions? I'll take a motion by Councillor Tovey, seconded by Councillor Moore, to approve the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. Back to you, Madam Acting Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll just interject here before we go to items related to enterprise. There was a notice here that, not a notice, just some information. So let me read it to you, that staff will be handing out the budget binders to all councillors this morning towards the end of the meeting. Councillors will have the opportunity to take the binders home with them. Your nighttime reading. It actually says, if you wish. Or they can leave them here and when the budget meeting begins. If you wish to have the binders sent to you at your local municipality, please notify the regional clerk before you leave, and she can organize that for you.
Just mention that they all have it electronically already.
Oh, and you all have it electronically already, and I'm sure you've all read it. Thank you very much. Yeah. So we have items related to enterprise programs and services, and Councillor Fonseca, could you manage that?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. And I know everybody, that was a request last year at budget time that you get those binders nice and early. So it's good that you have them either in hard copy to work on your fitness or by electronics. So thank you very much, and thanks for staff for getting that prepared in advance of our discussions around budget. Okay, on to item 9.1 is the energy market update. There is a presentation. I believe Jeremy Shembry, I apologize, is giving us a presentation on this. And there is a revised sheet in your packages on this energy market update report.
Okay.
Good morning.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity today to speak to you about the current state of Ontario's energy markets and the impact that recent energy decisions at the provincial level have had on the region of Peel. Joining me today is Peter Bicalso from the region's Energy Finance section, who will speak about provincial energy legislation and how these policy decisions have affected energy rates. I will be providing an overview of the future cap and trade program, and also will be speaking and providing a summary of possible benefits that the region will receive from the different energy policies that have been put forward at a provincial level over the last few years. So now I'll turn it over to Peter for the next slide.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of Regional Council, good morning. Ontario's energy system is designed to ensure that a clean and adequate energy supply is available to meet provincial needs. This includes emphasis on energy conservation and renewable energy to address both growth in demand and mitigation of climate change. Ontario's energy approach over the last 12 years is shown in this slide. The Electricity Restructuring Act was approved in 2004, and one of the provisions in this act created the Ontario Power Authority, or the OPA, which was tasked to ensure long-term adequacy of power supply in the province by contracting with generators and independent power producers. This legislation also led to the establishment of the provincial benefit, now known as global adjustment in our energy bills, electricity bills. And this is a mechanism to charge all electricity consumers with the cost associated with these generation contracts. The Green Energy Act and the Long-Term Energy Plan, which were approved in 2009 and 2013 respectively, established the expansion of renewable energy generation through the feed-in tariff program of the province, and greater emphasis was made on energy conservation and demand management as well. The cost of the renewable generation expansion and the energy conservation and demand management programs are also included in the global adjustment rate. The Climate Change Mitigation and Low-Cost Carbon Economy Act was approved this year, and this is to ensure that programs are in place to achieve the long-term goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. The legislation establishes the cap and trade program, and some of the costs of this program will be reflected in increases in natural gas and gasoline rates. This graph shows the trend of electricity generation rates per megawatt hour in Ontario. The blue dotted line is the hourly Ontario energy price, or HOEP, while the red dashed line is the global adjustment charge. The generation charge is composed of both of these components, and if you add the green line, the red line plus the blue line, it will total the green line, which is the generation rate. This generation rate does not include the transmission and distribution charges. Global adjustment, which is the red dashed line, is a variable monthly electricity commodity charge that accounts for the difference between the spot market price, or the hourly Ontario electricity price, and the rates paid to regulated and contracted power producers. It also includes the cost of energy conservation incentive programs and the demand response programs. If you will note, the global adjustment in that graph is increasing steadily, especially after the approval of the Green Energy Act and the Long-Term Energy Plan. It's trending upwards. And this also coincides with the retirement of our coal plants in Ontario. This is because the coal plants have to be replaced with more expensive renewable generation, as well as new natural gas-fired generators, which are more cleaner than the coal plants. And this also increased because a lot of energy conservation efforts was made by the province. Now, these sharp increases in the GA have led to overall increases in electricity rates. For 2015 and year-to-date 2016, the average increase is approximately 11.5%. So 2015, 2016 is about 11.5%. All consumers have been impacted by these rates, and although the rising cost is experienced by everyone, there are global benefits as well as region-specific benefits to this, such as financial grants from the province to fund our energy projects. So these benefits and some information about cap and trade will be discussed further by Jeremy.
Thank you, Peter. So I'll begin by giving a bit of an overview of the upcoming cap and trade program that the province will be putting in place on January 1st, 2017. The cap and trade program puts a cap on the amount of emissions that an emitter is allowed to emit. They call that an allowance. So if you want to emit more than your allowance, you're going to have to buy credits. If you're an emitter that emits less than your allowance, you can sell these credits on the market. For the region of Peel, we're not going to be a direct participant in the cap and trade program because we don't meet the criteria to be a participant. So that could be good or bad news. I think a number of people at this point are pleased with that fact that we don't have to be an active participant in this manner, though we can still take action on how we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which I'll discuss a little bit further in these slides. That said, those that do have to participate in the program, and specifically I'm pointing out the natural gas companies and your fleet fuel companies, they are going to have to be directly impacted. And it is their intention that they've made quite clear that they plan on passing this impact on to the consumer. So in effect, the region will be indirectly impacted through cap and trade, primarily through our budgets related to natural gas and to our fleet fuel. The anticipated increase on natural gas is going to be about 3.3 cents per cubic meter, and the anticipated impact on gasoline is 4.3 cents per liter, and for diesel will be about 4.7 cents per liter. So the overall impact to the region of Peel for the upcoming 2017 budget, we anticipate to be approximately $553,500 for our natural gas usage and $290,000 for our fleet fuel usage, which have both numbers have been incorporated into the budget that you'll be seeing in coming weeks. As Peter noted, the provincial legislation has put into effect many measures that have had monetary impact to the region of Peel, specifically that global adjustment piece that incorporates the costs of having clean, renewable energy, promoting conservation programs, initiatives to different businesses and residents in our communities. It should be recognized that, though, that these decisions have had a positive impact to the region of Peel from looking at it from our climate change priorities. So this slide shows how the decision to close coal plants, increase the use of renewable energy, and incentivize energy conservation has led to reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see, in 1990, our energy-related corporate greenhouse gas emissions were 80% above our 1990 levels target. Our emissions continued to rise throughout the 90s and through the first part of the century by about 14%. I did want to pause on this slide, though, just to make sure it's clear that these emissions are related to our energy use. It's not covering other aspects of our corporate emissions, such as fleet and our wastewater streams. So this number of overall reduction that I'm going to be speaking to is going to be slightly different when we look at the corporate aggregate reduction. But that said, in 5 years, the region has seen close to half of our energy-related emissions being reduced. This is largely a result of a cleaner electricity grid, and these reductions can be attributed to the region's ability to complete energy conservation initiatives that were supported by the availability of conservation incentives and grants. Global adjustments' impact on electricity rates and cap and trade's future impact on natural gas rates will have an undeniable impact on our energy budget. The intent of this slide, though, is to highlight how those policy decisions have benefited the province and the region. At a global or provincial level, the decisions that have been made regarding our energy system has been done with the intention to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote a green economy, and ensure that there is sufficient energy supply to meet the province's current and future energy needs. Recognizing that the region's electricity and natural gas rates are funding these clean energy conservation programs, staff are working hard to ensure that the region reaps the benefits of these programs. As you can see under the region-specific benefits, the region receives revenue from clean energy generation projects, 80% funding for 2 full-time embedded energy managers, funding for a number of conservation initiatives, and we also receive a preferred industrial global adjustment rate for our larger energy consumers at the region of Peel. Recent news and policy decisions from the federal and provincial governments indicate that future energy and climate change funding opportunities will continue to become available in the coming years. Region staff are monitoring this closely, advocating for municipal funding, and are preparing to respond to future funding opportunities as they present themselves. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We do have a list. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. If you can flip to slide 3 where you show the electricity rate increase, I think this is very telling. I know from a supply perspective that we are probably good for the next 18 years. So our long-term energy plan is good. Prices should stay low, but all of those extra costs in the system are really going into global adjustment. So when we talk about green energy, when we talk about cap and trade, and all those good things from an environmental perspective that we need to do, somebody still has to pay for them. And at the end of the day, there's only so many pockets that can be picked for the consumer. So I do feel for the average consumer, I met a woman over Thanksgiving weekend, and she makes a choice on whether she buys food or pays her hydro bill. She's on electric heat. So these increasing costs in the system, I think we're well beyond a tipping point that the province needs to act. Too bad, Mr. Delaney couldn't have stuck around. We could have brought him back cracking the grill done. But do you, with the cap and trade, I know that you don't have an answer, but I'm sure you're going to be putting it on your radar screen for when the U.S. moves, because clearly we probably have to move in sync with the U.S. if they're backing down on any of those elements of cap and trade. Then it's certainly going to affect us. What was I going to say? I think that was just my rant for the day. I just know that it's just a chart that doesn't get shared very often with the average person, and I think that it's unsustainable. I'm glad that the region is participating in some of these programs for energy conservation, but there is a price to pay that we're paying for it a few times, and people forget that. So that's just my little rant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rasa. Councillor Sparvieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. I was reading a few weeks back, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, that Ontario will be purchasing power from Quebec. I don't know whether this is the first or whether it is already purchasing power from Quebec. Would you have that knowledge, whether it's a start?
Through the chair to Councillor Spilveri, the decision to purchase 2 terawatts of power from Quebec was part of the agreement through the cap and trade program, actually, and making sure that things would still be viewed as fairly if Ontario is entering in a similar cap and trade program that Quebec is in, because Quebec does have an abundant amount of hydro, which has 0 emissions associated with it. So they agreed to make that power available to the province so that we can reduce our emissions and therefore not have as much of a, businesses won't feel the same impact from cap and trade on that energy use. So this is a new piece, and it's intended to offset the peaking natural gas generation that is a dirtier, still quite clean, and Ontario's grid is quite clean, but it is the dirtier piece relative to hydro, nuclear, and renewable energy. I would have to confirm if we've been procuring or importing energy from Quebec in the past and what the volume is. I don't know if Peter has anything to add on that, or.
There was an agreement before that to have 100 megawatts available to Ontario from Quebec. And as far as if these are dispatched by IESO, we have no information about it.
So through the chair, it appears to me that whether hydro is generated by hydroelectric, whether it be in Ontario or Quebec, it's a much cheaper production than natural gas or wind turbines or solar or whatever new green technologies are coming along. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Spiveri, the province has been quite clear that that action was not intended to be a cost mitigation action, but more as a environmental climate change response. So I can't speak exactly to, nor have they revealed the terms of the costs around the importation of hydro from Quebec. So I don't know what I can't speak with accuracy on that question.
Yeah. Well, you know, where I was coming through with my questions is that, from my understanding, hydroelectric generation is much cheaper than the other forms of generation. And if Quebec has an abundance of hydro that they're selling to the U.S. and the Eastern Seaboard, and I'm from my understanding, they have a lot of capacity to generate even more. So I don't know whether there's an advantage to for Ontario to produce more gas-powered hydroelectric generators, or whether to put it more solar or wind turbines up in Shelburne, or more solar. I don't know if it's an advantage to Ontario, but it would make sense to me, the logical sense, that if the hydro from Quebec is cheaper, it's cleaner, that they should be buying more to make up the shortage that we have, rather than be investing in these very expensive forms of generation. Would you not agree?
Through the chair to Councillor Spiveri, I do agree. I think the best would be to get the most cost-effective energy that also results in that clean, zero type emission source. The region does have, like the rest of our community, has an opportunity coming up to comment on the long-term energy plan. They are renewing that as the province currently. They're in the early stages of that, but over the next number of months, they will be continuing to consult and seek input. That type of sentiment is something that we will be bringing forward to ensure that not only are we getting the best clean energy sources, but we're also getting it in an affordable manner for our businesses and our residents.
Okay, and then final question is that the region is not able to purchase hydro from Quebec directly and transmit it through their Ontario Hydro's lines, are we? Can we?
No.
Through the chair, I don't believe so, though I will look to Peter if he has anything to add.
Yes, Councilor Poveri, we cannot purchase directly from Quebec the hydroelectric power.
Thank you. I hope that this is something that we would promote. If it's cheaper from Quebec, then we should really be promoting that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the questions. Councillor Tovey.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's really interesting when you talk about energy and clean energy, and there actually is no such thing as clean energy. It just doesn't exist. Anytime you create energy, you're destroying something. Everyone talks about Quebec, but you should, if you want to see something really interesting on Quebec, and for any engineers in the audience, it's one of the most marvelous things I've ever seen in my life. We drove to Baie-Comeau. We did a canoe trip into Labrador, drove to Baie-Comeau, and you have to drive 250 kilometers north on this road that says Winding Road for 250 kilometers, and there's 5 hydroelectric dams on it. The one at the top is called Manic Sank. You can actually see it from space. It looks like a giant donut. The surface area of the dam that it's holding back is 20,000 square kilometers. It took them over 20 years to build the dam. They had to build a village, they had schools, everything. And when they finally kicked a diversion over and started flooding it, it took 20 years to fill the reservoir. That's why they have this cheap power, because and then they also cut a really great deal in Labrador with Newfoundland. Before Newfoundland realized the hydroelectric potential that they had, Quebec grabbed all the resources. So that was pretty smart on their part. But everyone thinks Manic Sank is really great and hydroelectric's really great, but they had to relocate 200 different Aboriginal bands because of this 20,000 square kilometers, and millions of animals and aquatic life were killed during that process. So there really is nothing, there is no such thing as clean power, that's for sure. I got that from a president of a power company. But I wanted to ask you about the cap and trade. So how is there any way we can use this to our advantage? Like one of the things we're looking at right now is district energy from the wastewater plant, for example, getting heating and cooling from GE Booth. Is there anything in cap and trade that would allow us to kind of leverage some of that, because we will be hopefully producing energy from that, heating and cooling, and that will of course offset, there should be some carbon offsets and that type of thing. Could you make a comment on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Tovey, you've hit on one of the ways that we could do that is through the carbon offset market. The province is still going through the process of setting up the actual cap and trade market, and they haven't yet provided all the details on how they envision the carbon offset market working. Though if we were to look at other jurisdictions like Quebec or California that have participated and have an offset market, our hope is that municipal projects such as the one that you've described would be eligible for that. An important thing for the region to keep in mind, though, is through negotiations and working with utilities in the province that we keep our environmental attributes. Oftentimes in contracts, if we were to do, I don't know if any of the area municipalities have done feed-in tariff programs for solar, but for the region, when we've done ours, in the contract, by them paying you that tariff, they're also getting the rights to your carbon offsets. They call it the environmental attributes. Likewise, on a number of incentive applications, they have similar language. So the province is trying to collect those things. So that's something, if we are going into an arrangement with the province in the future, that they are funding a portion of the work, we want to be keeping an eye open on if they're trying to claim the rights to the attributes, because that could limit the region's opportunity potentially to participate in the offset market.
Right. Well, they would have to keep fairly lockstep with California, I would think, because California's had their cap and trade for a while. Mm-hmm. And have you looked at the California how that works in California?
So yeah, they do have an offset market in California. There have been examples of waste management type projects, anaerobic digestion, where they've been able to participate in the offset market. So we do believe that there is an opportunity, and we are advocating to ensure that that opportunity is seen. I believe it actually is one of the advocacy positions that was put forward this morning when we were talking about earlier before council. So it is one of the 4 areas especially from the climate change lens that we're looking at. The only final thing is with the offset market, they don't always let businesses only purchase offsets. The province still wants to get their share, or the states in the case of California. So you still need to buy carbon credits in many cases, and they usually put a cap on the amount that you can supply or meet your allowance through offsets, which I've seen 10 to 15% of the overall, which is still something. But that's another thing for the region to keep in mind, that it's going to be a market as well. And if there's other types of projects out there in Halton Hills or in Toronto that come in at a cost is more cost effective, people might purchase those offsets instead of the region's offsets. So there's no guarantees, even if we are an allowable project, that people will be gravitating to a region appeal project.
Well, of course they will. We do things better than most people.
Then that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Unica.
Thank you. And I want to follow up on that, because this is part of the piece that I'm not understanding, this market they keep talking about and have been talking about for a decade, and it makes no sense to me. To try to help me out. Not so much to the market, but it speaks to it in a way. You were showing us the graph that says in gas and in diesel, we'll have to spend $800,000 more. It's 4 cents more for 1 liter of water, cubic meter, and the other. Where does that go?
Through the chair to Councillor Unica, what my understanding of where it will be going, and the province is still working this out a little bit, but there's conversation that there will be a green bank, and that will be used to fund other GHG initiatives throughout the community and at the regional level. So for transit infrastructure, for those types of initiatives. So it's not going to be a tax neutral solution, which they actually have done in British Columbia.
Going back to before, the couple of years I spent on Bay Street, that's not a market, but that's okay. Government call things funny things. I want to go back to the offset market. And I've used this analogy at the City of Mississauga, and I'm going to ask you, because again, I'm looking for this market that people keep talking about and I can't find it. So one of my ideas was that, healthy Mississauga with a good balance sheet, I can spend $100 million, $500 million. I can renew my fleet tomorrow of buses and make them all electric, because I have a balance sheet that I can go bore and do it. In this mythical example, let's assume the City of Toronto doesn't have my strong balance sheet. They can't, and they've got to spew out diesel for the next 20 years. So where's the market that says, hey, Toronto, you're going to pay for my buses because I will get credits from you because I've reduced my emissions. You're giving me so much per ton of the emissions that I've reduced. Oh, bad Toronto, you can't do it, and you haven't got the wherewithal to do it. So you're paying in, give Bonnie a check. Where's that market?
Through the chair to Councillor Unica, so if I'm following you correctly, the question is, how does those that can't afford to respond to the cap and trade program?
I'm going to, and it speaks to cap and trade entirely. I'm going to say, so what amount of carbon emissions will you allow me? Well, your bus fleet puts out 300,000 tons. I'm going to reduce it to 0, because we're going to have no emissions. We're going to go, and we'll make the investment. Who's paying my offset? So we've done that. We've made the investment. We're 300. Province, are you going to cut me a check? Or are you going to say, yeah, we got it from John Tory because they're spewing it out because they can't modernize, and Bonnie, here's your check? Or where is this market of any kind that somebody's talking to me about for the last 10 years?
Through the chair to Councillor Unica. So if you are underneath your allowance, you are able, so the market doesn't exist. First off, the market doesn't exist yet. So it is a future market. And I don't believe that the province of Ontario has made any claims that the market will be existing prior to 2017. So once this market does exist, if you are able to fall under your allotment, you're able to sell those credits to those that didn't have the same success. Let's say that you were able to go to 0 and Toronto ended up going to 400, so they actually needed another 100. So they can purchase those credits off of you, and the market will dictate the value of those credits.
So let me just stop you. I'll agree with everything you say if you're going to conclude by saying in theory, at some point in the future.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yanika. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Just a couple of questions around, it was a number of years ago that the province put out some grants and rebates on trying to get everybody to turn over to a greener energy, much like geothermal, solar, as such. With this increase, are we kind of heading in that direction again? And has there been any discussions around possible grants and rebates to make that move?
Through the chair to Councillor Paleshi, part of what you've seen already on this graph is the result of that. So yes, the province is paying businesses and residents to produce renewable energy, solar or wind or whatever they choose to proceed with. And as a result, that's brought up the cost, but that money's now been put back into the pockets of those businesses or farmers or residents in our community. So that's increased that. Going forward, the cap and trade program, if we're focusing on the cap and trade, is intended, from everything that has been said so far, that the money that they generate through revenue by putting more or less a tax on these businesses that are emitting beyond their allowance is going to be then used for businesses that are trying to find efficiencies or different corporations that want to put renewables on or green their fleet. That's the intention. And they have indicated in the Climate Change Action Plan significant funding that they're earmarking to make available to communities throughout Ontario to allow for that.
Okay, so 10 years ago, they, when they were providing the rebates and the grants, a business or a home looked at converting their furnace system over from, whether it be oil, electric, propane, natural gas. The return on investment to switch to geothermal was roughly around 14 years. Not bad. That's a good return. It's a good quick turnaround. And then when they got out of the rebates, it moved to the 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 year mark, where people started saying, hold on a second, is that where this is basically heading? Can people now say that return is going to be closer, within grabs, more reasonable?
Through the chair to Councillor Paleshi, I would believe that that's what the province is trying to do, is make these different types of initiatives more cost effective for the community, for the homeowner or for the business that wants to reduce their energy use for whatever reason, financial or environmental, and still be able to put food on the table or continue to thrive as a business in the community. So they've looked at, and even with the feed-in tariff, which oftentimes is cited as something that people were overpaid, the province has scaled back that tariff, trying to keep the payback within that 6 to 8 year return on investment. As the technology has gotten more affordable, they've reduced the tariff. So that, using that as an example, I can't speak for exactly what the province's goals are around what's an appropriate payback for businesses and homeowners, but I believe that if they're giving incentives, they're trying to make it affordable, and they're trying to also have that market transformation. And that, especially if you were to look at electric vehicles, that's something that they're very much trying to do, so that once you have that transformation occur, hopefully just the cost in general of those types of technologies will be less, and they don't necessarily have to be incentivized.
Okay, and I'll switch over to fuels for transit, biodiesels or gasoline mixed with ethanol. What are they? What is this increase going towards? Is it going towards the whole commodity, or is it just the portion of the fuel that, the fossil fuel, essentially?
Through the chair to Councillor Paleshi, it should be getting applied to the actual fossil fuel that actually emits the emission. So I would have to confirm this, but if you're using a B10 blend for your biodiesel, then I would say you're getting 90% of that hit on through the cap and trade program, because your emissions are just going to be less.
Okay. Have we at the region looked at diesel fuels and increasing the bio component. I know we were having issues. I think we were having issues at the City of Brampton as well with the blend, but mainly in the summertime. Were we looking at maybe increasing that to a higher percentage?
Through the chair to Councillor Pelleshi, we are currently at the region looking at a number of options to be addressing our term of council priority. So there is a fleet strategy where we're looking at right-sizing vehicles, using appropriate fuel sources, and just having the right driver behavior. Those are the three key pillars that we're looking at. And when there is opportunities to be using biodiesel for a specific truck or heavy machinery, that is something that's being explored, but it is going with the other types of drivers and factors like weather and other things that can help guide that decision. It's not just, we're not just doing it in isolation of just looking at the environmental piece. Unfortunately, I'm not the best person to speak to that. The fleet manager would probably be able to give you a greater information on that. I don't know if anyone else.
I didn't guess the fleet manager's not here.
Yeah, I don't believe he is.
Okay, just then another question further to that. Slipped my mind. Must not have been that important. Are we doing that all in-house? This might be a fleet manager or Dan or somebody. Are we looking at that in-house, or are we, going to some of the big players in the fuel industry in terms of Shell, Pure Oil, Suncor to get there? Like they have labs upon labs looking into the way they can change and do stuff. Are we reaching out to them to see where we can bring them into the discussion?
Through the chair to Councillor Pelleshi, just last week, as a result of a contact that Commissioner Lebrec was able to set up, we did connect with Enbridge and some private companies that have been talking about compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas and putting it into your heavy machinery, the larger vehicles. So yes, it's not something that we're trying to do in isolation and come up with all the solutions internally. We are looking to see what other jurisdictions, what other private companies have been able to do that have similar types of needs as what the Region Appeal fleet has. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Shado.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but after Councillor Pelleshi mentioned about biofuel, Nando, you can refresh my memory. It was 7 years ago. Mississauga Council in our budget meeting, staff came to us and gave us a cost for converting a lot of our fleet to using biofuel, and the cost for the fuel at that point was higher, but they had a really good business case that showed that we could keep the vehicles longer, and the maintenance costs over the period of time that the fleet was in operation was less than what it was if we were using regular fuel. And it was an increase that year to the budget. I can't remember how much. It was a fairly significant increase, but council decided that for environmental reasons that we would go with it. And it was rather interesting because I think it was a year later when we were dealing with the budget, staff came back and said, oh, by the way, the biofuel costs actually went down and regular fuel went up. And we ended up saving several $100,000 that year by doing the switch. So I guess I hadn't really thought about what we were doing at the region at the time, but we've been doing it for a long time in Mississauga, and it has had a huge cost saving from the fuel perspective, but it has also had a really major cost saving on the vehicles and the replacement costs and maintenance costs of the vehicles. So I would hope that that our staff, fleet management staff, would be here at the region would be looking at that very carefully. And the experience in Mississauga is there. I mean, you don't need to research any further than within our own region to find out what the costs were. Councillor Carlson is the car person that was with the expert, and he may be able to expand on that a little bit more, but on where the savings were and the impact on the vehicles. He's also our environmental guru, so.
Yeah, there was a tremendous saving at the city. We moved to the biofuel, if you remember. That saved X amount with the diesel usage and maintenance on the diesel trucks. Mind you, it was hard to get a letter from the diesel manufacturers that said we could use biofuel, but once that happened, we switched over quickly to that. And well, as we right-sized the fleet of all our, instead of giving the size of a vehicle appropriate to the level of commissioner, we gave it to the size for the duty that was required. So a lot of guys that were driving 350 diesels changed to smart cars because really they didn't need to drive around a diesel truck. So that took a little bit of toing and froing, but we got the fleet down. And I'm trying to remember the actual savings, but it was we won an award 1 year for about a 9% reduction, if I remember correctly. So, but this is a few years back. And we've kept it up. It's sort of become background noise now. It's just the way we do business, along with the LED lighting that took off 3,000 cars or something off the road with the greenhouse gas emissions not generated. So we've had a kind of deliberate approach over. It must be over 10 years now. Time goes by. So, yeah. Is that a pretty good synopsis off the top of my head?
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. I think Commissioner, Dan, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, if I could, Madam Chair. Jeremy's giving you a really good insight into some of the things we're dealing with on the hydroelectricity side and the electricity front. Yeah. He's part of the team that's actually leading our work on the whole reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as part of that term of council priority. And he'll be bringing back regular updates, including there's a whole pillar of work on greening the fleet. So, we could spend all day talking about the fleet today, but we could bring you back more hard facts and some of the issues that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So we will continue to bring you forward. And if there are further investments we have to make, then you can kind of choose, because we always look at the total, like the full Rubik's Cube. It's not just the environment, it's cost, it's operations, how the equipment serves us in the field and everything else. So we're actively engaged. The latest thing with Enbridge, where they're actually suggesting they might even bring money to the table to help us with conversion. So we're looking for any opportunity we can to meet council's goals as well as reducing overall costs.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We do have one more speaker on the board, Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just very quickly on these topics and projects that are going forward. Are we looking at the projects we're doing, and even though the market's not there, we don't have a price on carbon, but looking at banking the credits for the future, even though there's not a cost there, so we actually have a bank, and if this market is implemented and there's a price on carbon, that we're ahead of the game and able to eventually sell those on the open market?
Through the chair to Councillor Mahoney, we are more and more conscious of that going forward, as now there's been additional details on what that market's going to look like. That said, when we have made the business case if the incentive value is greater than what we're seeing right now as the value of that carbon, and it would allow for a project to happen that might not have happened if they were providing that incentive or if they're providing that tariff. Right. We have, I'm not going to lie, in cases we have provided the province with the attributes of that project. But going forward, now that we have greater detail and clarity around what potentially the value of those attributes are going to be, it helps us when we're weighing the positives of foregoing those attributes and getting the incentive, or would we rather keep the attributes and not proceed with an incentive or a tariff of some sort?
And have you been talking to AMO and FCM and other municipalities and kind of groups as to what they're doing, and perhaps tackling this with associations and with groups to see what they're doing and how they best tackle it?
So through the chair to Councillor Mahoney, yes, I believe it was just last week, the time's been flying. There was an energy symposium held by AMO, which that I had the fortune to attend, and I was speaking to a number of different colleagues at municipalities like Hamilton, like Toronto, York, and talking specifically about the carbon offset market and what their thoughts are. And everybody is kind of at a wait and see position because the details haven't yet been completely presented. So though we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we can't act in the future, so we're kind of proceeding cautiously.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jeremy and Peter. And obviously, this is, I think, a topic of discussion we have to watch carefully. So any updates brought back to council, I think, are very important. I think the graph on the screen, the electricity rate increase, is very telling to Councillor Ross's point about the global adjustment increases that as you mentioned in your presentation, there are benefits to the region overall, but at the same time, the impacts to region of Peel consumers, taxpayers, like individual taxpayers, but also businesses. We have to be able to balance those. So it's been a very good discussion. I think direction, any opportunity, you mentioned that the Region of Peel will be at the table in further discussions with the province and federally potentially as well. And in light of what happened in the U.S. with the election, I think it's very important that we are kept up to date as a council on an ongoing basis. So thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Ross, would you like to move the presentation and the report? Moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Pelletier. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, item 9.2 is a Region of Peel infrastructure update. This is for approval. I don't have any questions on the board. I'll move it. I actually had one question. So does this include, under housing, does this include the Peel Living portfolio or no?
Through you, Madam Chair, it excludes the Peel Living portfolio. We are in the process of integrating the building condition assessments that have recently been completed on that portfolio. And so next year's report in all likelihood will look at how we report it. They're not region-owned assets, they're Peel Living.
Yes.
So we're trying to figure out how we would report on it.
Okay.
But it will be updated.
Just wanted clarification on that. Thank you very much. And moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. All in favor? Carried. We moved 9.3 already. 9.4 is an overview and update on the status of reserves, and this is for information. Moved by Councillor Downey, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 9.5 is the Region of Peel staff analysis. This is also for information. Councillor Miles.
I guess when I read the report, I kind of wondered why we have the report. Like, what does it mean? What's it supposed to mean?
We provide this annually for council, just to give you an overall sense of our staffing year over year, and growth or declines in our overall staffing levels, and also an overview of FTEs and headcount, because they are different. Some include apportionments, and the other is everyone receiving some form of compensation.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess for me, I don't really believe that numbers of staff and population really are a good determinant of whether or not we're doing a good job or not. So I would rather see numbers correlated to efficiency or purpose or so.
I think, Councillor Miles, there was a good question, but I think there was also in the last term of council at a time when there was a review in terms of like succession planning. I think there was a request from council at that time for staff to bring back annually this type of report. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain that came about in the last term of council. So maybe perhaps it has to be presented in a different way, but I do recall at that point there were a number of gaps that were found in different departments. So there was a request at that time to bring it forward. I don't know if staff can speak to that further as well.
Yes, there was that request previously. The other thing I would say is as we move to an outcome focus, I think we'll start to present our staffing in relation to the outcomes achieved. So that may help.
Okay. That just makes more sense to me. Okay.
Good points raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Oh, I just wanted to, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I did find the information useful, but that is a good suggestion to try to link it further to outcomes. It is, it's not, you can't extrapolate too much from the numbers, but they're good for information.
Thank you. Staff, I don't know if you want to comment any further. I think that is a good suggestion, Councillor Miles. Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles, would you like to move the report. Okay, moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Ross. All in favor? Carried. 9.6 is the United Nations United to End Violence Against Women. This is for information as well. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have some scarves that I'm going to hand out from my office, and they are in support of Arma House, and that's the only second stage supportive housing that we have for abused women and families in the region of Peel. And I just wanted to let folks know that and remind folks that November is Women Abuse Prevention Month, and the purple stands for courage, survival, and honor. And by wearing these, we stand in solidarity with women who have been abused, and will also help raise the profile. So I know Arma House is in Ward 2, but we certainly serve all of Peel Region, so I will hand those out during lunch. And thank you to staff who will help me do that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ross, would you like to move the report? Moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We do have 2 items of communication under 10.1 and 10.2. They're both for receipt. We could move them together, seeing no questions on the board. Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And back to you, Madam Acting Chair. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Everybody seems to be getting antsy. I'm getting a lot of, we'd like to break for lunch. What about the in-camera? Just raise it.
Want me to get you some beef parsley?
Okay, no recorded vote, but let's just show of hands who would like to break for lunch.
You don't get to vote.
Yes, I do.
Actually, you do.
It's half? It's half, so it fails? Yeah. No, half. Thank you, everybody. We have a democratic process. Items related to public works. She counted.
So the 11.1 in Ward 2. Any questions, comments? Question, Councillor Ross.
Thank you very much. This was initiated. They went to lunch. This was initiated prior to my arrival on council. Do the people affected know that this is coming?
Yes.
Okay, so they were part of the discussion before this went in.
And the quarter revision meeting we had was their opportunity to raise concerns, and nobody had concerns.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Janika. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Item number 2, Ward 7, special charge of the Municipal Act. Councillor Janika. Moved by Councillor Janika, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Carried. Item number 11.3, Ward 1 in the incinerator dome. Did everybody like the nice picture of the incinerator dome? Moved by Councillor Tovey, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All in favor? Carried. There's 3 other items that were on the revised agenda. 11.5, it's the Peel Region response to the... Oh, did I miss 4? Oh, I'm sorry. 11.4. It's, I had a note to that. It's not Committee of Adjustment, it's Committee of Revision. So Councillor Innes, Councillor Moore, all in favor? Carried. Now we go to 11.5. 11.5 is Appeal Region response to the GTA West Advisory Panel questions. Moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Fonseca. I'm sorry, Councillor Pileshi.
Not a problem, Chair Stor. Thank you so much for recognizing me. I thought this was a good, there was a lot of good correspondence from the region. Much like the City of Brampton, we kind of, we did the same just last week. Monday, I mean. Thank you, Chair of Planning, Moore. I just wanted to, highlight two things. One, and I did it at the City of Brampton, the emphasis on HOV, HOT lanes, the opportunity for maybe designated goods movement corridors, good movement lanes, also with the opportunity, bless you, of autonomous vehicles. You know, I think that we're a lot closer to that than really what we might think. In 5 years, we could be sitting sitting on top of us. So I just wanted to maybe get your take a little bit about those comments.
Well, if I could, I'll give it a shot, and if you want way more detail somewhere in here, no? Okay, we'll keep it high level. I'm all standing between you and lunch. All the issues, we see this corridor not one purpose, it's a multi-purpose. So HOT, HOV are in there, rapid transit, you know, dedicated lanes, maybe a BRT. It's actually potentially a power corridor as well for hydro or other natural gas and things like that. The AV issue was we actually, when we presented this to the panel with York and who else was at the meeting? Halton and ourselves presenting to the panelists. Everyone agreed today AV is in its infancy, but with the way technology is, it's not 20 years out, it's a lot sooner. Actually, I had a presentation yesterday from staff internally here that we're already consolidating with other municipalities looking at AV and what its implications are with the MTO. So it's moved up, but it's a little difficult to say what exactly is the impact, but we know it's going to have an impact. But the reality is, with adding millions more population to the GTA, even with AV, we still believe we need this kind of corridor.
And I agree to that. I thought that we would get more of a concentration on forward-thinking future with, you know, the majority of HOV, the majority of HOT lanes, goods movement lanes, and AV vehicles.
Yes, if I could, Councillor Pileshi, in our preliminary discussions with the panel, our premise is in the first round of first waves of success is autonomous vehicles would likely be more used for those short trips. You know, the whole Uber will go AV, and it'll be for the short trips. Long haul trips are going to be more complex and difficult. The freight industry is looking at AV, and there's been some pilots in Scandinavia. I know Budweiser has had its first shipment of beer in Colorado, 200 kilometers with no driver, and the vehicle. Well, the driver was actually in the co-pilot seat, but at some point we will have driverless vehicles, and that'll help. But you still need to have the vehicle on the road.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Happy to move it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. 11.6. A letter from City of Brampton, implications transfer of the roads from the region. We need direction on this, so any questions, comments? Councillor Sado.
Thank you, and I think this encompasses the request I made at the beginning for the motion that we dealt with at the last meeting for a minor amendment. And I guess direction from the clerk, do I need to move that we reopen to make this amendment?
You will require a two-thirds vote to reopen to amend the motion.
Okay. I guess then I'm going to move that it be reopened so that we can deal with an amendment from the City of Mississauga, which I don't think it's not contrary to the motion, it's just a little bit more explanatory, but also to enable us to accommodate the request from the City of Brampton. So I would move first that we reopen the question at this time, and then I'd like to speak to the issue.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Groves? Okay, the motion is to reopen the motion we had at the previous meeting. I think it was the previous meeting. And we needed 2/3 votes. All in favor? Carried.
Okay, so
It's carried.
So what I would like to suggest is that, and I think staff have the motion, if they could put it up on the screen. It's really only to ask that the modeling that is done would include the financial, it's the middle section, would include the financial implications of all possible transfer scenarios, including one that only considers the transfer of regional roads to the City of Mississauga, so that we can get a complete picture that if the other two municipalities do not wish to pursue moving the regional roads, then we would be able to get a full cost analysis of the implications if only Mississauga proceeded. And the request that came in from the City of Brampton to extend, Councillor Parrish, who was the mover, and I have discussed it, that obviously you need some more time, and I guess on sober thought, our staff are also working on budgets right now, and to ask them to delve into this with 90 days when the next 60 days are really budget, and then you're over Christmas and January. So I would be prepared to add that to the motion, the request of the City of Brampton, if we could amend them both at the same time.
Okay, are we clear on the motion?
I think if we add the City of Brampton's request in there as well. You need to change the top, the first, remove the 90 days, and I think Brampton's asking for an additional 90. So
Make it
we're
180.
talking 6 months.
Waited this long, what's another few days?
I think if one of the Brampton councillors wants to come up with a more specific date, I'm just trying to keep it all in with the same amendment, to keep it clean.
While we're doing that, Councillor Moore?
Yeah, actually, I was going to suggest June 30. Okay.
I didn't say June 30th. You were asking for an additional 90 days from now, so that would take it to, I got to count my fingers.
No.
April 30th.
I don't think that's the intent of the motion. When we had our discussion, it was, they were saying 90 days was not sufficient, and they were asking for an additional 90 days. So if we
from now.
just sort of, take out this time that staff are spent in all of our municipalities, they're up to their eyeballs with budget. This is budget season. For them to turn their minds to this, I'm suggesting, 90 days would be January, February, end of March, April, May, June. Why don't we just put a date? And that way it's not, is it 90 days from which date? When we made the last decision after budget? So I think it's easier for staff to say, we'll do this before we break for summer. So I'm going to amend it to June the 30th. You can fight over that if you want, but I think that's, really reflects 180 days from the 1st of January.
She's amending.
Well, I think I can move an amendment. You can disagree with it if you want. I think it's all of council that'll decide whether or not that's a reasonable amendment.
As chair, can I make just one suggestion? If you do it till June 30th, you won't be able to get any business done before the fall time again. You may want to make that May 30th. Or whatever. I'm just saying that if you push it right to the end, you know what happens with those. It goes into Christmas. Anyway, that's my comment.
May
Okay,
3rd.
Councilor
Okay.
Palashi.
Are you back on? Okay.
No, not
Speaking to the amendment, so that was my understanding, that we were kind of looking at the financial implications of all three municipalities and what it would look like. I don't know why it has to be defined specifically in there for Mississauga. I'm not going to make a decision on my end whether I know exactly what it's going to look like in all aspects, that being, you know, status quo, Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon. Like, why? That was my I don't know why the amendment to this. Can somebody speak to it on staff side?
If I could, through the chair, the conversations, I guess, after the last council meeting was feedback from all three municipalities. They weren't all together. Caledon's position is being consistent from day one as far as not interested in any jurisdiction changes. What we've gotten from city staff from Brampton is more focused on operations and maintenance, and we're working with that. And then Mississauga's position is being consistent. The data we've already provided you probably back 6 months ago, that gave everyone the opportunity to assess what the implications of going off on your own were. And I don't believe City of Brampton staff have given you a detailed briefing at this point, and that may be part of the issue. We've given all the municipalities, in effect, all the data we have, and they just have reported differently. I think the value, and the CFO can speak to it, is the auditor will be able to validate that maybe a little bit more, and then you'll have more assurance. But ultimately, you need to get briefed by your own city staff or town staff as well.
Okay. Just on that, though, I think at the City of Brampton's point of view, when we were provided with all that information, it was kind of a here you go thing, and when they looked at it, it wasn't, they couldn't determine really the outcome. They didn't see where the monies were going. It was very confusing. And thank you, Councillor Parrish. I understand that's why we're doing that. And with I know that we did need some more time. I'm okay with June 30th. Maybe is there a meeting in July, or there's no meeting in July?
Yes, there's one meeting in July,
Okay.
the first
Yep.
Thursday of July.
So I'm good with June 30th. I just don't fully understand or really support right now this amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Parrish?
Well, the amendment was asked for, I think, after a call with the auditors and the staff of the region. I think there was some confusion coming out of the last meeting. What the auditors will need to consider is the financial side of road devolution, the cost, the condition of the roads, the impact it's going to have on the other two municipalities. So why we specifically zoned in on that particular piece is also we need to know. If we're paying 60% of it now, and we're going to continue to pay all of it, all of our obligation to everyone. We're taking back 9 roads. We need to know sooner rather than later if we want to proceed with this, because we are the big payers. So our staff wanted this added. I was under the impression that the staff at the region had no problem with it, and I was under the impression that the auditor had no problem with it. Everybody wanted clarification. So we've put that in there for clarification. I also don't agree with June 30th. This thing's been going on for 8 years. We need at least 6 weeks of council when we come back with a report so we can deal with it. We also have a reasonable approach to staff. If they came back on April 30th and says, we're nowhere near doing it, can we have another 30 days? Nobody around this table is going to say no to them. We don't want a half-cooked loaf of bread. We want the thing done properly. So I would like to see that as April 30th. I would like to see that piece inserted so that we can make up our minds. We're the big payers on this. And our staff wants to know what direction we're going in. It's going to take 2 years to do this, we're told. And the sooner we start, the better, if we're going to do it at all. So I don't see the problem with it. We're the ones, right for the last 8 years, and Pat can speak to this, that are asking to take back 9 roads. And it's been shut down every time we asked. So we just would like the numbers. And we'd like them tuned specifically to what happens if we take the roads back, our own, and we continue paying for yours. I don't know why this is so difficult. And I'm hoping that out of respect for the 8 years we've slugged at this, and I think Pat's been carrying the ball on it, that you just say, yes, go ahead. Look at the numbers. We're not saying we're going to come back with a recommendation. We're saying we just want the numbers formulated in such a way as we can make a reasonable decision at our council.
Okay, are you suggesting that the number or the date be changed to April 30th? All right, do you want that as an amendment?
Yes, with the understanding that if they come back and say we're getting close, but we don't quite have it, we give them another 30 days. But if you make it June the 30th, we're not going to look at it till September, and we all know that.
Okay, so we have a mover and seconder on that indicating June 30th. Are you happy with April 30th?
No, actually, we have the mover and seconder on April 30th. The June 30th was an amendment
Separate.
that Councillor Moore
Okay.
had.
Okay,
We
so
hadn't
then help me out.
gotten
So
that
then we
far.
have to vote on the April 30th.
Well, we haven't had all the speakers yet.
Okay, we have
Okay,
Councillor Moore.
Just so I'm clear, I moved an amendment. Because I didn't get a seconder, it wasn't a legitimate amendment.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Otherwise, the April 30th would be an amendment to an amendment that hadn't yet been voted on. I moved June 30th, and so I'll vote against the April 30th. I understand that it gives us wiggle room and we're all going to be friendly at the end and give more time. So if somebody wants to move a second the June 30th, that might be helpful. But it does say by June the 30th. It doesn't mean they can't come by the end of April or the end of May. It's by June the 30th. And we do have a meeting in July. But I'm going to ask everybody, including our colleagues in Mississauga, and I understand that you've approached this with, some degree of frustration. We've had a lot of changes at the City of Brampton. We've had some fairly dramatic staff changes. We have people in new roles. So in addition to going into, budget years are always difficult. This one is going to be, no more less difficult than the ones we've dealt with in the past. So we have a lot of new staff, a new organizational structure, and so I'm asking respectfully to give our staff at the City of Brampton the time that they need. I know that they will work as hard as they can, and if they can come before this council with a report, along with our regional colleagues, by the end of April, they'll do that. But, I'm asking you to please give us some wiggle room on this. I'm sure there's a high degree of cooperation around the table, and we understand where Mississauga is coming from on this. But I personally would like to give our staff at the City of Brampton as much time as they need to get the job done.
Okay, Madam Clerk, how do I handle this? Do we vote on
Speakers
the
to
June
the
30th?
amendment. Speakers to the June 30th amendment.
Okay. We have a motion. It's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gross. I just want to clarify what we're doing. So we have a motion for the June 30th date.
If I can speak as the mover of the original motion that is now being amended, I am prepared, rather than making it an amendment to my motion, to accept the June 30th date.
Accepted as a friendly amendment.
As a
Your
friendly
motion to
amendment,
June.
so that we're not voting on each one individually, and take the whole thing as the motion that's before us.
Thank you.
Isn't that what he said, friendly?
Okay, so is everybody happy now with the June 30th date? Not whether you're happy, it's on the board. Okay, Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the clerk, I wanted to speak on the amendment that Councillor Pelleshi spoke to. So what are we speaking to right now? Are we speaking to the date? What are we doing?
We're speaking to the whole thing.
The whole thing. So I can speak to that amendment then. Okay. I also support where Councillor Pelleshi and support Councillor Peleshi's comments with respect to that amendment that why does it have to be specific to Mississauga? I thought when we debated the motion, and I thought there was a lot of debate around it, and I thought we had that sorted out. And so I also believe that it's all three municipalities. It's a very, very important topic and issue to all municipalities. So I can't support, Councillor Sato, your amendment where it has to come back to specifically address Mississauga. I mean, we talked about this in great lengths, so I can't support that.
Councillor Sato.
Thank you. I guess I'm baffled by this. I don't see what the big deal is. When we discussed it at the last meeting, the goal was to do this, and that's what we thought we were doing. Our staff at the city said that the wording actually did not give us the opportunity. My biggest concern has been what the financial implication would be to the city of Mississauga, were we to say we are taking back, or we want to take back our roads, pay 100% of the cost of our roads, maintenance and capital. If the other municipalities do not do the same, then we would be continuing to pay 60% of the cost of your roads, Councillor Groves, and your roads, Councillor Pelleshi. If I were sitting on your side, I would say, wow, that's a great deal, let's do it today. But we don't know what that cost is going to be. And, with all due respect, I think that the other members of council from the other municipalities should also have respect for the city of Mississauga and the councillors that sit here, that we need to know what that cost would be. If at the end of the day, you've already said you don't want to take over the regional roads. Brampton said it many, many years ago they didn't, and then in the previous term they said that they might. So just let us get the information, please. That's all we're asking for. Thank you.
Councillor Forbieri.
I'd like to call the question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the question has been called. You have the motion in front of you. Is there any misunderstanding? All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now, does that include, Councillor Sato, the other information? So it's all together now. Okay, back to you, Madam Acting Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's go to... There's no notice motion? Okay. There are no notice of motions, so we'll go on to bylaws 14.1.
Excuse me, I had put an added item on the agenda. Under other business.
Terribly sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I have raised this issue before at Regional Council, so today I have prepared a motion. And it's really in regards to our regional agendas. And the system that we have here is not working, quite frankly. All regional councillors, I think, are printing their agendas. And there is huge confusion in the area municipality around this because of the size. So we're not allowed to print in the city of Brampton, we're not allowed to print our individual agendas because it's too big. So they have to go down to the print shop. Half the time when we get here, we don't have additional agenda items that came later. Yesterday, at the end of the day, we were running out to, Wednesday, we're running out to another event, and I am standing there waiting for additions to the regional agenda that had just come in. And then my assistant informed me that they used to just get the additions to the regional agenda, and now they get the whole agenda with a grayed out that they have to go in and pull out. And so we have 10 or 11 members of council all trying to deal with the regional agendas. So my motion is, I've got a bunch of whereases, which I just talked about, but basically it is that the Region of Peel provide printed agendas to all members of council, and further that all additions be printed at least 48 hours in advance of council meeting, the exception being extenuating circumstances. Please start printing our agendas and sending them to us so that we have them in a reasonable period of time before meetings and that we can come here and be prepared. So that's my motion. I'm moving it.
I'm going to second it.
Seconded by Councillor Moore.
The city clerk wants to.
Can we call the vote, please? All in favor?
Done.
Thank you.
Now we go to Byron.
Yep. Need to recognize him.
Councillor Ennis?
Just make a request that I don't want mine printed. So,
Yeah, that's the appropriate way.
yeah.
That's the appropriate way.
If maybe the clerk could ask the individual councillors that would like to continue to use it.
I have sent out emails in the past and I've had no response back that people wanted them printed. I will send out an email, and if everyone
Okay.
could respond
Good.
back,
Thank
if
you.
you wanted
Very
it
good.
printed or
Very
not, I'll do that. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, do not want them printed. I've been getting them electronically for 2 years, and it works fine with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion is carried. Could we just simply raise our hands if we would like to have our agenda printed?
I'm not sure. Oh, wait.
Which councillor, I guess.
Annette will. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the list of councillors Carlson, Gibson, Ionica, Mayor Jeffrey, Medeiros, Miles, Moore, Paleschi, Raz, Sato, Spovieri, Starr. Did I
And
catch
Annette.
everybody?
She always wants it printed.
Groves?
Annette Groves.
Okay, thank you. Together, so it's just the one.
Okay.
Councillor Carlson doesn't want his by paper.
I had talked to Kim before and she'd said that.
I only did that because I understand Mayor Kolb used to use that all the time. So, Chair Kolb, right. And he was mayor. I have a resolution here that the bylaws listed on the regional council agenda, being bylaws 53-2016 and 4-2016 be given the required numbers of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the acting regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed there too. Could I have mover, Councillor McFadden, seconder, Councillor Naka? All approved? Okay, sorry. Sorry, my favorite food restaurant.
Then you need a motion to move in camera.
Oh, yes, that. I see you guys are going to be sorry that you didn't eat. We have to have a motion to move in camera.
Item 15.2 that is in my ward, I don't need to go in camera. That's the renewal of the lease for the health clinic that we have in the heart of the city of Mississauga. I spoke with staff yesterday. They've negotiated an excellent extension to the lease, and I'm very happy with how it was done, so I do not need to go in camera for that, if that helps the chair. Thank you.
Any concerns?
No, we still need to move in camera.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll still need to move in camera. Councillor Pelletier moves it. Second, Councillor McFadden. Thank you very much.
May the long time sun shine upon you all.